Take back the godly medicine? The ruler Silver Rock's lips curled into a mocking smile as he shook his head. Lord Jinan, it's not a matter of us taking back the godly medicine in his hands. It's time for him to settle the score with us. Lord Jinan squinted his eyes. He was not a stupid person. He immediately understood what the ruler Silver Rock meant. What should we do now? Lord Jinan asked. A cold light flashed through ruler Silver Rock's eyes, and his voice turned cold. My idea is that we should join forces and directly fight him. Otherwise, with our individual forces, we are definitely not the 9th Culpa King's opponent. We will only be killed by him one by one and defeated one by one. Lord Jinan's eyes flashed with a thoughtful look before he nodded and replied, Sure. The Lord Jinan still understood the principle of mutual dependence. In the face of the problem of the 9th Culpa King, the Lord Jinan and the ruler Silver Rock were like grasshoppers on a rope. There was no need to think about it. If the 9th Culpa King really intended to fight, he would definitely not let them go. As for the two of them, as long as one of them was defeated, it meant that the other side was not having a good time. The 9th Culpa King has a grudge with the two of you, but not with me. Silver Rock, why did you call me here? The third prince of the Defeng Divine Kingdom, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke up. The ruler Silver Rock did not feel embarrassed at all. Your Highness, you're right. You do have no enmity with the 9th Culpa King. However, as the #1 ruler of the universe, no one knows how many treasures he has in his interspatial ring. I think your Highness must be interested in this, right? I can promise here that if the three of us join forces to kill the 9th Culpa King, when we divide his treasures, we won't take my share and will give it all to your Highness. What do you think? When the third prince heard this, he suddenly burst out laughing as if he had heard a funny joke. He looked at the Silver Rock with a mocking expression. Silver Rock, oh Silver Rock. As the third prince of Defeng Divine Kingdom, do you think I'd lack the treasures of a mere 9th Culpa King? After he finished speaking, he got up and planned to leave. Ruler Silver Rock nodded. He was not disappointed in the least. It was as if he'd expected the third prince's refusal. Your Highness, please wait. Ruler Silver Rock called out. The third prince stopped in his tracks and turned around. Oh? What else do you want to say? Your Highness? The ruler Silver Rock said with smile. I know you're not interested in the 9th Culpa King's treasures, but aren't you interested in his title as the #1 ruler of the universe? I've recently heard that the Supreme Emperor God of Defeng Divine Kingdom is planning to choose one of his 9 princes to be the next ruler of Defeng Divine Kingdom and ascend to the throne. If your Highness can kill the #1 ruler of the universe, your power in Defeng Divine Kingdom will reach a whole new level, right? In addition, I think that if your Highness can help this time, as the Southern Garrison Liege Lord of the Defeng Divine Kingdom, he will be more or less grateful to your Highness. The ruler Silver Rock turned to look at the Lord Jinan. The Lord Jinan continued with a smile. Your Highness, if you can help me this time, I'll definitely help you ascend the throne on behalf of the Defeng Divine Kingdom. The ruler Silver Rock and Lord Jinan both smiled at the third prince. Your Highness, believe me, if we gather the power of the three sides, it will definitely be easy to suppress a 9th Culpa King. Ruler Silver Rock said. When the third prince heard this, his eyes flickered with uncertainty. After a long time, the third prince looked at the smiling ruler Silver Rock and Lord Jinan with an expressionless face. 9th Culpa King, I can go with you to kill him, but I want half of the things in his interspatial ring after his death. If our Defeng Divine Kingdom really starts the fight for the throne, I hope that you can persuade the Supreme Emperor God of your Defeng Divine Kingdom to support me to the throne. How about it? The Defeng Divine Kingdom and the Defeng Divine Kingdom were not far from each other, and they were both top powers in the universe. If he could form a good relationship with the Defeng Divine Kingdom, it would be a great help to the third prince. The ruler Silver Rock and Lord Jinan exchanged a smile and nodded without hesitation. Your Highness, it's an honor for you to join us. The third prince made a sound of acknowledgement and said, Tell me about your plan to deal with the 9th Culpa King. Lord Jinan also looked at the ruler Silver Rock with curiosity. He believed that the ruler Silver Rock must have had a plan in mind when he called them over. Ruler Silver Rock smiled. It's very simple. In the 9th Kulpa King's camp, the only one who can be brought out is him. As for the other divine Marquis Qingfeng and the ultimate ruler, they are nothing to be afraid of. Therefore, when the time comes, the three of us only need to restrain and suppress the 9th Kulpa King. As for the nearly 100 ultimate rulers under the three of us, it's enough to crush the rulers under the 9th Kulpa King. Once the ultimate ruler under our command completely defeats the forces under the 9th Kulpa King and turns around to kill him, no matter how powerful the 9th Kulpa King is, he will inevitably be defeated. If he's lucky, he may even be able to completely kill the number 1 ruler of the universe. The Silver Rock's eyes glowed with a sinister light and seethed with killing intent. The Lord Jinan and the third prince looked at the ruler Silver Rock, and for some reason, their hearts could not help but shiver. In the central area of the Taro ruins, on the mountain where the 9th Kulpa King was located. Let's go. I'm only going to trample the Silver Rock. The 9th Kulpa King stood at the head of the group. After he finished speaking in a deep voice, he took a step forward, turned into a stream of light, and took the lead to soar into the sky. Immediately after, whoosh, 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 the other ultimate rulers followed closely behind, transforming into a dozen or so streaks of light that shot toward the ruler Silver Rock. At this moment, the sky was extremely bright. Led by the 9th Kulpa King, the streamer, which was accompanied by more than 10 peak ultimate rulers, exuded a powerful and terrifying aura. It had no intention of hiding its aura at all as it streaked across the sky. Jian Wushuang was wearing a wide hood, a black robe, and a sword case on his back. He was among the ultimate rulers, and they also flew toward the Silver Rock. Jian Wushuang, I'm afraid this battle won't be easy. If you can't handle it, you should leave first. Do you understand? Divine Marquis Qingfeng held a heavenly halberd in his hand as he warned. All right, he said. Jian Wushuang replied with a smile. Boom, boom, boom. The 9th Kulpa King and the others had a great momentum. They quickly streaked across the sky, leaving a long trail of flames behind them. When the countless ultimate rulers in the Taro ruins saw this scene, their faces could not help changing slightly. Let's go, let's go. Something big is probably going to happen in the ruins. Looking at this direction, could it be that the 9th Kulpa King is going to find trouble with the Silver Rock? The heavens of the Taro ruins? I'm afraid it's going to change. 2 hours later, the 9th Kulpa King, Jian Wushuang, and the others arrived at the desolate blood plain where the ruler Silver Rock was. Dozens of ultimate rulers had set up camp here, making it a lively scene. After the 9th Kulpa King arrived, the dozens of ultimate rulers under the command of the ruler Silver Rock all looked up at him nervously. The 9th Kulpa King looked down at them and shook his head disdainfully. It seemed that they had the advantage in numbers, but they were just a pile of loose sand. Then, he raised his head and looked at the most magnificent palace in the center of the plain. His cold voice exploded like thunder. Silver Rock, come out and face your death. Boom! In an instant, the 9th Kulpa King's voice fell like rolling thunder, shaking the entire desolate blood plain. However, it was quiet in the palace, and no one responded. When the 9th Kulpa King saw this, he could not help but sneer. He directly raised his palm and slammed it down on the palace. Bang! A huge palm as white as jade condensed in the void. Waves of destructive aura seeped out from the gaps between the fingers of the hand and directly stirred up the white waves in the void. This palm was far more terrifying than it had been in the recruitment test for the ultimate rulers. It was as if the world itself had changed colors, and it was capable of plucking the stars and summoning the moon. Even the sun and the stars seemed to be nothing more than cannonballs in this palm. This was the true strength of the 9th Kulpa King. At that moment, the countless ultimate rulers present were all shocked. The ultimate rulers who came with 9th Kulpa King were still fine. After all, they had already seen the power of 9th Kulpa King's attack. This time, the terrifying power caused by 9th Kulpa King's real attack was also within their expectations. As for the Silver Rock's subordinate Omega ruler, He had never seen such power before. His face turned cold, and his eyes filled with shock. Just as the palm was about to hit the palace, a gloomy voice sounded. "Ninth Culpa King, you're the one who's going to die." Chi. First, a golden spear shot out from the palace and struck the giant palm, neutralizing its power. Then, the ruler Silver Rock shot out of the palace and grabbed the golden spear. "Humph! I thought you wouldn't dare to come out." The Ninth Culpa King stood with his hands behind his back and slightly sneered. "In that case, die in peace." He did not waste any more time. He took a step forward and charged toward the Silver Rock. The Ninth Culpa King is indeed the Ninth Culpa King. He's still so overbearing. There was no hint of panic on Ruler Silver Rock's face. He chuckled, shook his head, and then began to flee. "Escape? Silver Rock, you were lucky enough to escape from me 3 million years ago. Do you think you can escape this time?" The Ninth Culpa King's face was expressionless. He took a heavy step, and his body suddenly shot out like a cannonball, sweeping toward the ruler Silver Rock. The two of them, one in front and one behind, quickly disappeared from everyone's sight. "Looks like we'll be able to avoid a life-and-death battle." Ruler Spear River and the others could not help but let out a sigh of relief. However, at this moment, a sudden change occurred. "Kill! Little brats under the command of the Ninth Culpa King. Go to hell! Ha 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 ha!" Without the Ninth Culpa King, it's equivalent to a group of dragons without a leader. "Kill them!" Sneers and angry roars suddenly sounded from all directions. Divine Marquis Qingfeng's expression changed drastically as he saw nearly 100 ultimate rulers rushing over from all directions. On the plain, the final rulers under the Silver Rock's command, who had been nervous and solemn, revealed bloodthirsty and cruel smiles. How can there be so many people? Where did all these people come from? Not good. These ultimate rulers are from Defeng Divine Kingdom and Lord Jinnan's people. Guys, look, they are the divine armor guards under Lord Jinnan. And that person is the #1 general of the third prince of the Defeng Divine Kingdom, Ruler Horned Flame. We've fallen into a trap. What? Ruler Spear River and the others paled as they spoke in shock. Divine Marquis Qingfeng's heart sank. He knew that he had fallen into a trap. He raised his head and looked in the direction where the Ninth Culpa King had chased after the ruler Silver Rock. He took a deep breath. Now, the people of Defeng Divine Kingdom and Lord Jinnan had appeared here, but the third prince and Lord Jinnan had not appeared. He was afraid. Pong pong pong. In the distance, for vast waves of divine power suddenly exploded. One of the waves of divine power was the Ninth Culpa King. As expected, Lord Jinnan, the third prince, and the ruler Silver Rock have joined forces. Divine Marquis Qingfeng's face was filled with bitterness. Ruler Spear River and the others were in complete despair. At this moment, the morale was at its lowest. Pada. At this moment, someone suddenly patted his shoulder. What? He turned his head and saw Jian Wushuang looking at him with a calm smile. What are you still doing here? Are you just waiting to be killed? Jian Wushuang said. Divine Marquis Qingfeng said with a wry smile. Don't you see the current situation? That was nearly 100 ultimate rulers. Although they were not strong, they were all true ultimate rulers. If the Ninth Culpa King was still here, we could barely fight him, but now the Ninth Culpa King is entangled with them, with just us. How are we going to fight? Hearing this, Jian Wushuang could not help sighing, shaking his head and asking, You don't know how to fight, do you? Yes. Divine Marquis Qingfeng nodded with a bitter smile. Then watch carefully. Jian Wushuang suddenly turned his head and looked at an ultimate ruler from the Defeng Divine Kingdom's camp. The Wuxia Divine Sword appeared in his hand. The next moment, Jian Wushuang slashed down with his sword. Bang! In an instant, a blood-colored half-moon sword light slashed down, and the sky was split 3,000 feet apart. How should I fight? As for the ultimate ruler who had charged forward first, he was directly turned into dust by this slash, his body and soul destroyed. Jian Wushuang turned back to look at the shocked Divine Marquis Qingfeng, Ruler Spear River, and the others. He said indifferently, Now, Do you understand? At this moment, the entire place fell into a deathly silence. Divine Marquis Qingfeng, Ruler Spear River, and the others all widened their eyes and looked at Jian Wushuang in disbelief. When the 100 or so ultimate rulers who were rushing over from all directions with cruel smiles on their faces saw this, their expressions changed rapidly. It was as if they had stepped on the brakes. They stopped at the same time and stared at Jian Wushuang. 1. He killed an Omega ruler with a single sword strike? Who is this kid? How can it be so terrifying? The most important thing is that this person's divine power ripples show that he's only a 4th stage chief ruler. The ultimate rulers, who were united by Lord Jinnan, the 3rd prince, and the ruler Silver Rock, looked at Jian Wushuang in shock. In the eyes of the many ultimate rulers present, a 4th stage ruler was like an ant. However, such a person had killed an ultimate ruler with just one sword. Jian Wushuang's expression remained calm. He glanced at Divine Marquis Qingfeng, Ruler Spear River, and the others without saying anything. In the next moment, he turned to face the nearly 100 ultimate rulers that filled the sky. Holding the Wuxia divine sword, he calmly said, "Whoever comes will die. Whoever comes will die." The words that came out of Jian Wushuang's mouth seemed ridiculous and ridiculous. A trifling 4th stage chief ruler was actually telling nearly 100 ultimate rulers that whoever came would die? However, the entire place fell into a strange silence. None of the 100 ultimate rulers showed any disbelief. They hesitated when they saw Jian Wushuang and his sword. Just now, they had seen with their own eyes that a 4th stage ruler had killed an ultimate ruler with a casual strike. What kind of terrifying technique was this? No one was willing to test the sword with their own lives. Behind Jian Wushuang, Divine Marquis Qingfeng, Ruler Spear River, and the others exchanged looks of shock. Nearly 100 ultimate rulers. What a terrifyingly powerful force this was. However, they had been suppressed by Jian Wushuang until they were as silent as cicadas in winter. Half a beat later. He's only a 4th stage chief ruler. How strong can he be? He must have used some secret technique that cost a lot to create that terrifying sword attack just now. Now he's an arrow at the end of its flight, and he's just bluffing. Humph! A spear-wielding, golden-armored ultimate ruler suddenly snorted. This man was the only divine armor guard left under Lord Jinnan's command. He was also an expert of the ultimate rulers. "Follow me and kill." Immediately, the divine armor guard shouted and took the lead to charge at Jian Wushuang. The divine armor guard is right. He's only a 4th stage ruler. How strong can he be? Can it be heaven-defying? There are so many of us ultimate rulers, yet we're scared by a mere 4th stage great ruler. Wouldn't we become a joke if word got out? 2 more ultimate rulers snorted coldly from the crowd. Decisiveness flashed in the eyes of the 100 ultimate rulers, and they swarmed toward Jian Wushuang. They did not believe that a mere 4th stage ruler could fight against 100 people and stop so many of them. Whoosh! Whoosh! A series of shocking divine powers with terrifying power rushed toward Jian Wushuang. For a time, the heavens and the earth shook. Even the top-tier experts of the ultimate rulers had to avoid these powerful attacks. Good! A deep voice came from under the wide black hood of Jian Wushuang's cloak. In the next moment, Jian Wushuang suddenly raised his head and his eyes were filled with fighting intent. Kill! Jian Wushuang took a step forward and his sword-wielding figure instantly turned into an afterimage as he charged toward the 100 ultimate rulers. After he came out of the 2nd level of the Tarot Ruins, he had not used his full strength, whether it was killing the 2 rulers, Star Ruler or Heavenly Ruler, or defeating the 9th Culpa King's giant palm with one sword strike. Even he himself was not sure what the limit of his current combat strength was. It just so happened that he could use this battle to test his strength and see how far he had reached. Split open the sky. Jian Wushuang slashed out with his sword. In an instant, the Wuxia divine sword in his hand shone with a blood-red light. A blazing sword light as bright as the sun slashed out from the Wuxia divine sword and fiercely hacked at the dozens of attacks that were pressing down on him. Clang! The Wuxia divine sword trembled thousands of times in an instant, and the cries of gods and the low groans of Buddhas and demons came from the sword. The current Wuxia divine sword had long since changed its appearance. It could be said that apart from the sword embryo, everything else was completely different. Back then, the sword spirit of the tarot sword had controlled Jian Wushuang's body. In order to improve his strength, he had put in a lot of effort and racked his brains to merge the top divine materials in the second level of the tarot ruins into the Wuxia divine sword. As for the Wuxia divine sword, it had risen from the appearance of a high-grade nomological cardinal treasure to the limit of a nomological cardinal treasure. It did not seem like there was much of an increase, but in fact, the difference in power between the two was like heaven and earth. Boom! 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 As the sword slashed out, it was as if a galaxy was pressing down from the sky, directly crushing the dozens of attacks as if they were dried weeds. What? This is impossible! The countless ultimate rulers called out in shock. As for Jian Wushuang, he was like a wolf in a flock of sheep and started to kill. Whoosh! Jian Wushuang no longer held back his divine power. He used all his might to increase his divine power by 13,500 times. Along with his extremely high comprehension of the laws of the universe, his sword skill was not only exquisite and abstruse, but its power was also shockingly strong. Every move he made was filled with the aura of the great Tao. Long before he had entered the second level of the tarot ruins, Jian Wushuang's power had been on par with the top experts of the ultimate rulers. Even when compared to the almost invincible ultimate rulers like Divine Sun Xianxia, he was only a step away. Now, Jian Wushuang's strength had improved greatly again. In terms of battle strength, he was definitely stronger than Xianxia. Moreover, he was different from Xianxia. Xianxia was just an ordinary life form and had limited divine power. When facing the siege of nearly 100 ultimate rulers, Xianxia could only retreat. However, Jian Wushuang's divine power was vast and boundless. He was not afraid of using it up at all. Hence, even though there were close to 100 ultimate rulers in front of him, some of which were peak ultimate rulers, Jian Wushuang was not afraid at all. Even if he fought one against 100, these ultimate rulers could not pose much of a threat to him. They could only be slaughtered by him one by one. The Wuxia divine sword in Jian Wushuang's hand exuded a monstrous sword essence. Every slash could severely injure an ultimate ruler, and only the top ultimate rulers could barely withstand it. But even if he could take it, the top-tier ultimate ruler's divine body would still be in shock. I said, whoever comes up will die. I remember you were the first one to rush up, right? Jian Wushuang's eyes were cold as he looked at the divine armor guards hidden among the many ultimate rulers. The divine armor guards were terrified by the sight of Jian Wushuang killing people. They had to answer, "It's me." "So what? Then you can go to hell." Jian Wushuang's eyes glinted coldly, and he instantly used the dragon-killing secret skill. The power of his divine power increased again, and his speed increased tenfold. He dodged the saber light that an ultimate ruler was slashing at him and attacked the divine armor guard. In the surrounding void, Divine Marquis Qingfeng, Ruler Spear River, and the other Omega rulers all stared at the scene in front of them in shock. What did I just see? A single fourth-stage chief ruler is suppressing a group of ultimate chief rulers. Isn't this a little too fierce? My God! What kind of terrifying battle strength is this? I've never heard of anyone in the entire universe who can suppress a group of ultimate rulers as a fourth-stage great ruler. Heaven-defying. His combat strength is simply heaven-defying. Divine Marquis Qingfeng and the others rubbed their eyes and gulped in disbelief. Originally, when they saw the sudden appearance of nearly 100 ultimate rulers, they had been in despair and had almost given up. However, Jian Wushuang's attack instantly caused a storm in their hearts. Jian Wushuang was like a peerless sword god who had descended to the world. With an invincible posture, he had destroyed nearly 100 ultimate rulers. Divine Marquis, should we go up and help Jian Wushuang? An ultimate ruler swallowed and whispered, "Do you think he needs to?" Divine Marquis Qingfeng shook his head with a bitter smile. "All we need to do is keep an eye on our surroundings and make sure the Omega rulers don't escape." After saying that, he raised his head again and looked at Jian Wushuang, who was fighting against the 100 ultimate rulers. A complicated look flashed in his eyes. When they first arrived at the Taro ruins, Divine Marquis Qingfeng had acted as a senior and guided Jian Wushuang. He knew that Jian Wushuang was strong, but he thought that Jian Wushuang's strength came from his talent and potential, not his current strength. Even after Jian Wushuang and Qing Shuzi were evenly matched, Divine Marquis Qingfeng did not think that Jian Wushuang's strength had surpassed his. But now he had no choice but to admit that he was definitely not Jian Wushuang's match. He even thought that Jian Wushuang was already an invincible existence among the ultimate rulers in terms of power. In the whole world, as long as the supreme martial artist did not appear, only the 9th Culpa King could suppress Jian Wushuang. This is a shockingly talented demon. Divine Marquis Qingfeng sighed. He looked at Jian Wushuang with envy. He was a veteran ultimate ruler who had cultivated for longer than the 9th Culpa King. However, in terms of cultivation base, he was not even a match for the almost invincible existences among the ultimate rulers, let alone the 9th Culpa King. Jian Wushuang will definitely become a top-notch giant arm in the universe in the future. Divine Marquis Qingfeng mumbled to himself, his tone confident. On the other side, the battle was still ongoing. Satisfying. Jian Wushuang fought in the crowd. He activated the dragon-destroying secret skill and activated the Wuxia divine sword to the extreme. No one could block his sword. It had been a long time since Jian Wushuang had such an enjoyable battle. He felt so carefree that he could not help but laugh out loud. The surrounding ultimate rulers, seeing this, could not help but feel terrified. A monster. This person was simply a monster. Whether it was his boundless and vigorous divine power or his comprehension of the principles of the universe, they had all reached a level that they could not reach. Bang! With a loud explosion, the spear in the divine armor guard's hand was cut in half by Jian Wushuang's Wuxia divine sword. The divine armor guards were forced back 2,000 feet by Jian Wushuang's sword again. They were extremely frightened. At that moment, his high-grade divine armor was on the verge of breaking and the vast divine power in his body was almost depleted. He knew that he was on the verge of collapse and he could not take another sword from Jian Wushuang. How can a stage for great ruler be so strong? The divine armor guard's fighting spirit was replaced by fear. Jian Wushuang's power had far exceeded his expectations. He could not help but think that even if his master, Lord Jinnan, came, he might not be able to defeat this 4th-stage ruler. The person I want to kill can't escape. Jian Wushuang looked at the divine armor guards. He took another step and rushed toward them. Damn it! Seeing this, the divine armor guards' expressions changed drastically. They immediately turned to a burly man in an iron skirt and shouted, "Horned Flame! Don't forget we're on the same side now. If I die, how good will you be?" This muscular man was none other than the number 1 general under the 3rd prince, Ruler Horned Flame. Ruler Horned Flame's expression wavered upon hearing this. The divine armor guards were right. The moment the 3rd prince agreed to work with the ruler Silver Rock and the Lord Jinnan, they were already in the same boat. If the divine armor guards died, their camp would not have an easy time. "They're here." Ruler Horned Flame took a deep breath, and a determined look appeared in his eyes. He flipped his right hand over, and a massive black saber instantly appeared in it. Chi! The next moment, a terrifying flame shot out from the black blade, burning the air. Then, divine power burst forth from the ruler Horned Flame's body. He took a step forward, roared, and jumped toward Jian Wushuang. Go to hell! The divine armor guards also performed a powerful secret skill that burned their divine power and blood essence. They changed their dejected state and stabbed at Jian Wushuang with their broken spears. What? Jian Wushuang looked at ruler Horned Flame and raised his eyebrows. He could sense that this ruler Horned Flame was far from ordinary. Now this is interesting. Jian Wushuang smiled. He unleashed his 13,500 times divine power and charged toward ruler Horned Flame. Bang! Jian Wushuang's Wuxia divine sword collided with ruler Horned Flame's flaming divine saber. A loud explosion rang out, and the shockwaves from their clash created a terrifying white wave of air that forced the surrounding ultimate rulers back several hundred yards. Then, Jian Wushuang felt a burning force coming from the hilt of the flaming divine saber. What? Jian Wushuang was surprised. This ruler was much stronger than the divine armor guards. He was probably the strongest expert among the 100 ultimate rulers. Although he was not invincible among rulers, he was at least very close to that level. Then, he waved his hand and the heat was immediately suppressed. Jian Wushuang was surprised, but he did not know how shocked ruler Horned Flame, who had retreated 3 steps, was. What a terrifying power! Ruler Horned Flame lowered his head to look at the saber in his right hand, which was trembling from the numbness, and his heart filled with shock. One should know that he was an ultimate ruler who had proven his Tao with his strength. His strength was enough to grab 100 mountains and crush the Earth Star. However, he was forced to take 3 steps back by Jian Wushuang's sword. Again! Die! Ruler Horned Flame raised his head and roared before charging toward Jian Wushuang again. Great blazing tyrannical saber technique! Fire snakes slithered out of the giant saber in his hand and followed the saber light to slash at Jian Wushuang. On the other side, the divine armor guards, who had returned to their peak strength at the cost of a forbidden technique, stabbed at him with their broken spears. This stab was enough to collapse a mountain. Ha 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 ha! Good! Seeing this, Jian Wushuang laughed fearlessly. The battle intent in his eyes surged to the extreme and he also burst toward the 3 people. The 3 of them seemed to have turned into 3 shock waves as they collided together. Bang 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 bang! In the blink of an eye, the 3 of them had exchanged hundreds of moves, causing the void to crack. The aftershocks of their battle created thousands of giant pits on the desolate blood plain. Under the joint attack of Ruler Horned Flame and the divine armor guards, their battle strength soared instantly. Waves of attacks surged toward Jian Wushuang like the rising tide of the sea. Jian Wushuang's expression was cold. He did not use any superpower, but the Wuxia divine sword in his hand seemed to turn into a storm. Not only did it suppress the attacks of the Ruler Horned Flame and the divine armor guards, but it also had some spare power to bombard them. The place where the 3 of them fought formed an isolation zone that was nearly 1,000 feet wide. Destructive energies kept intertwining and colliding, and the other ultimate rulers could not even get close. Kill! On the other side, Divine Marquis Qingfeng looked at the remaining dozens of ultimate rulers who were ready to escape, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He raised his halberd and charged forward. Bang! Immediately, Divine Marquis Qingfeng turned into a streak of light and stabbed forward like a sharp knife. Ruler Spear River and the other 10-plus powerful rulers followed closely behind, charging at the 30-plus ultimate rulers. The 30-odd ultimate rulers had already lost all their courage from Jian Wushuang's killing. They had no intention of fighting at all, so Divine Marquis Qingfeng and the others immediately chased after them and killed them. But at this moment, in the direction where the 9th Culpa King had disappeared, a deafening wild laughter suddenly came from. Haha, Blood Nether Emissary, I thought you wouldn't come. But it's good that you've come at the right time. The 9th Culpa King can't escape now. We can totally suppress him with our combined strength. His voice was deafening, and he laughed madly. The voice came from none other than the ruler Silver Rock. Jian Wushuang, who was in the middle of a fierce battle, heard the laughter and his eyes suddenly lit up. The people from Blood Sky Palace are here too? The 9th Culpa King mocked Jian Wushuang and he frowned. Jian Wushuang naturally did not doubt the strength of the 9th Culpa King. He was able to compete with an ordinary supreme. However, among the people who were fighting with 9th Culpa King, the 3rd Prince and Lord Jinan were invincible among the ultimate rulers. Even in a one-on-one battle, they were only slightly weaker than 9th Culpa King. The ruler Silver Rock was barely invincible among the ultimate rulers. The 3 of them were already difficult to deal with when they joined forces. But now, the people from Blood Sky Palace had intervened. When the 5 blood messengers of Blood Sky Palace joined forces, they would be unrivaled among the ultimate rulers. However, there were 9 blood messengers in the Taro ruins, and they had all arrived. When the 9 blood nether emissaries joined forces, their combat strength would be even more terrifying. Jian Wushuang could clearly feel that at the place where the 9th Culpa King was, After the 9 tyrannical divine power auras barged in, the divine power fluctuation belonging to the 9th Culpa King immediately weakened quickly. Obviously, with the arrival of the 9 blood nether emissaries, the 9th Culpa King had begun to be suppressed. I can't waste any more time here. Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes and turned to look at Ruler Horned Flame and the divine armor guards with a cold glint in his eyes. Haha, the Royal Highness and the others are about to defeat the 9th Culpa King. When they are free, I'll see if you're dead or not. The divine armor guards noticed the change in the situation of the 9th Culpa King's battlefield in the distance. They could not help but show a look of ecstasy and laugh. I don't know if I'll die or not, but the two of you won't be able to live. Jian Wushuang shook his head and sent the divine armor guard flying with his broken spear. At the same time, his eyes turned cold. Innate divine power, original universe. Innate divine ability, life intimidation. In an instant, the two great innate abilities appeared at the same time. First, a profound aura of the laws of the universe descended, and the world instantly darkened. It was pitch black and there was no light. The divine armor guards and Ruler Horned Flame's power were both affected to a certain extent by the boundless darkness. Immediately after, the life intimidation effect was triggered, and a suppressing force from a supreme life form instantly descended. It was a pressure from the depths of the soul that came from a high-level creature to a low-level creature. Time seemed to have frozen at that moment. The divine armor guards and the Ruler Horned Flame froze. Under the effect of life intimidation, they looked at Jian Wushuang and had the urge to worship him. What kind of method is this? The two of them were like water buffaloes that had fallen into a swamp. They turned their heads with difficulty to look at each other, and they could see the shock on each other's faces. As for Jian Wushuang, he had already charged forward with his sword. Die! Jian Wushuang's expression was cold as he stabbed his sword into the Ruler Horned Flame's chest. Then, a sharp and terrifying sword essence burst forth from the Wuxia divine sword. The sword essence also contained an unprecedented killing power. Crash! Ruler Horned Flame was also wearing true treasure armor, but it was not of a very high level. Although it was a top-tier mid-grade law true treasure, it wasn't at the level of an upper-grade law true treasure. Jian Wushuang's Wuxia divine sword, on the other hand, had already surpassed the category of an upper-grade law true treasure and reached the extreme of a law true treasure. In terms of level, it was much higher than the true treasure armor of Ruler Horned Flame. Thus, the moment the sword intent within Wu Qi exploded forth, the true treasure armor on the surface of Ruler Horned Flame's body was instantly torn apart. The terrifying sword intent continued to attack Ruler Horned Flame's divine body. In an instant, Ruler Horned Flame's divine body was ground to dust, and his divine power was completely obliterated. Bang! With an explosion, the first general under the third prince of the Defeng Divine Kingdom, Ruler Horned Flame, died. An ordinary life form has limited divine power. Once a true treasure armor is forcefully torn apart, the power of my sword principle will be enough to kill him instantly. Even if he's a top-tier ultimate ruler, he'll still die. Jian Wushuang's eyes were cold as he looked at the supreme treasures left behind by Ruler Horned Flame. He could not help but smile coldly. Jian Wushuang knew very well that the reason he had been able to kill Ruler Horned Flame was not only because his power was far above that of Ruler Horned Flame after he had used the original universe. Most importantly, his Wuxia divine sword had instantly destroyed Ruler Horned Flame's body defense, rendering his true treasure armor useless. Without the protection of a true treasure armor, Jian Wushuang could naturally kill him with his divine power. Run! At that moment, the effect of life intimidation disappeared. The divine armored guards seemed to have found a life-saving straw, and they immediately shot back in fear. The divine armor guard instantly moved 10,000 feet and let out a sigh of relief. Just as he turned his head to see if Jian Wushuang had caught up with him, he suddenly saw from the corner of his eye that a blood-red sword light as bright as the moon was slashing at him with the power of thousands of thunderbolts. The blood-red sword gleam that was as bright as the moon grew larger and larger in his eyes. Then it grew larger and finally, no! Arg! The guard howled as the blood-colored sword light streaked through him. In terms of power, he was inferior to even the ruler Horned Flame, and his defensive abilities were even weaker. The guard was instantly slain, and the blood-colored sword light continued for another 1,500 meters before finally weakening and disappearing. In the distance, Jian Wushuang withdrew his gaze with an indifferent expression. With a step, his body turned into a black flowing light and rushed toward the Ninth Kulpa King's battlefield. In the Taro ruins, above the 9-layered clouds. Ninth Kulpa King. Surrender obediently. Ninth Kulpa King. If you give up resisting and swear a tribulation oath to be my slave, we can spare your life. Ninth Kulpa King, 3 million years ago, when you exterminated my entire clan, did you ever think of this day? Ninth Kulpa King. Hand over that supreme divine medicine, and we, the Blood Sky Palace, promise you that we will never interfere in your affairs. A series of cold sneers kept coming. The Ninth Kulpa King stepped in the void, his expression gloomy to the extreme. Lord Jinan, the ruler Silver Rock, the third prince of the Defeng Divine Kingdom, and the 9 blood messengers of the Blood Sky Palace. A total of 12 supreme existences among the ultimate rulers had formed an encirclement and trapped him. Not only that, but the ruler Silver Rock and the others were obviously prepared. They had also set up a powerful array around them, which greatly suppressed the Ninth Kulpa King's strength. Even though the Ninth Kulpa King's combat strength was heaven-defying, he could only ward off the attacks of these 12 super experts and not fight back. If this continued, the Ninth Kulpa King understood that even if he was a perfect life form with boundless divine power, he might still be exhausted to death here. If you want me to die, sure. But I'd like to see who will be the first one to die with me. The Ninth Kulpa King's gaze slowly swept across the faces of Lord Jinan and the others, and a cold sneer appeared on his face. He did not show any fear in the face of these threats. On the contrary, he could feel the blood that had been frozen for dozens of chaos cycles begin to boil. It had been many years since the Ninth Kulpa King had stepped into the ultimate ruler realm. No one had ever posed any threat to him, not to mention this life and death crisis in front of him. You're putting up a stubborn resistance. It's a pointless struggle. The 12 other ultimate rulers laughed coldly, but none of them were in a hurry to attack. They knew that with the Ninth Kulpa King's heaven-defying combat strength, at this final juncture, if he really fought to the death regardless of everything, at least half of the 12 of them present would fall in the hands of the Ninth Kulpa King and be buried with him. No one wanted to be a scapegoat. Oh? Why? Just now you all said that you wanted to kill me, but now you don't dare to. When the Ninth Kulpa King saw this, he suddenly laughed out loud. His laughter was extremely arrogant, contemptuous, and unbridled. As soon as he finished speaking, the Lord Jinan and the others could not help but look a little unsightly. Which of the 12 of them was not a top-tier heaven's favorite in the outside world? Who would not be afraid and respectful when they saw them? Fine. Since you guys aren't going to make a move, I'll make a move. After the Ninth Kulpa King finished laughing, his eyes suddenly turned cold and he stared at the ruler Silver Rock. The Ninth Kulpa King hated the Silver Rock to the core. Die! In the next moment, the Ninth Kulpa King's eyes flashed with a cold light and he attacked the ruler Silver Rock. As for the ruler Silver Rock, he seemed to have sensed it long ago. He took out a golden spear and shot it at the Ninth Kulpa King. At the same time, the ruler Silver Rock stepped back slightly. Lord Jinan and the third prince rushed out from both sides to block the Ninth Kulpa King. 2 huge divine wheels appeared behind Lord Jinan. These divine wheels were engraved with 9-legged golden crows. Immediately, like a blazing sun, they smashed toward Ninth Kulpa King. As for the third prince, who was wearing a 9-clawed python robe and a purple gold crown, he flipped his right hand, and a pale golden dragon pattern jade seal appeared. It carried an overbearing and unparalleled suppressing force and pressed down on the Ninth Kulpa King. Get lost! The Ninth Kulpa King frowned, and a touch of anger flashed across his face. He sent out 2 palms, one toward the divine wheel of Lord Jinan, and the other toward the dragon-patterned jade seal of the third prince. Great Destruction Seal! Great Yellow Spring Seal! Rumble, rumble, rumble! In an instant, the ninth Culpa King used his ultimate technique, and a violent aura burst out with him as the center. Two thick and terrifying palms, along with the ninth Culpa King's palm strike, ruthlessly smashed toward Lord Jinan's two huge divine wheels and the third prince's dragon-patterned jade seal. Lord Jinan and the third prince were both of noble status, so the divine wheel and the dragon-patterned jade seal were naturally not ordinary items. One was refined from the core of the sun, and the other was a replica of the imperial jade seal of the Supreme Emperor God from the Defeng Divine Kingdom. Both of them had reached the level of high-grade supreme treasures of principles. Bang! However, these two high-grade nomological supreme treasures were directly sent flying by the ninth Culpa King's two terrifying palms. As for the ninth Culpa King, other than pausing for a moment, his chi and blood were slightly turbulent. He once again stretched out his 5 fingers and grabbed at the head of the ruler Silver Rock. Even the confident Silver Rock ruler was taken aback by this. The golden axe could not even stop the ninth Culpa King for a breath's time. It was directly turned into powder by the ninth Culpa King's violent divine power. Just as the ninth Culpa King's 5 fingers were about to hit the head of the ruler Silver Rock, 9 ghostly figures appeared behind him in an instant. Die! A cold voice was heard. Then, the 9 blood nether emissaries hacked down at the ninth Culpa King's back with black evil sickles in their hands. Damn it! A look of anger flashed in the ninth Culpa King's eyes. The 9 sickles carried an extremely terrifying poison. If he did not avoid them, even if he killed the ruler Silver Rock, he would die under the 9 sickles first. The ninth Culpa King's eyes flickered quickly, and a hint of hesitation flashed across his face. In the end, he still decided to avoid the sharp edge and find another opportunity. Bang! The ninth Culpa King's figure flashed and dodged to the side. PFFF. However, it was still too late. A sickle hit his back hard. Although it could not tear his true treasure armor, the poison contained in the sickle had already invaded his divine body. Ninth Culpa King staggered and was almost cut down from the 9-layer cloud ridge. Taking a deep breath, the ninth Culpa King stabilized his body and looked back at the 9 expressionless blood nether emissaries. His expression was extremely gloomy. Individually, these 9 blood nether emissaries were weaker than any of the people present. However, when they joined forces, they formed a flawless formation. In addition, they had 9 evil sickles with terrifying poison, which gave the ninth Culpa King a headache. It was the appearance of these 9 blood nether emissaries that instantly changed the situation, causing the ninth Culpa King to be firmly suppressed despite his heaven-defying combat strength. The ninth Culpa King has been poisoned by the poison on our sickles. Let's take this opportunity to kill him, one of the blood messengers said coldly. His voice was emotionless and as cold as the cold wind from the 9 blood nether emissaries. In the next moment, the 9 blood nether emissaries turned into 9 ghostly black shadows and attacked the ninth Culpa King. Lord Jinan, the third prince, and the ruler Silver Rock looked at each other and nodded in unison. They also burst out all their divine power and charged at the ninth Culpa King. Ninth Culpa King, you will die today. The ruler Silver Rock laughed fiercely. He actually used 36 golden spears at the same time, spinning them toward the ninth Culpa King. Each of the 36 golden spears was more powerful than before, and purple-black venom dripped from their tips. Even the ninth Culpa King's face turned extremely grave when he saw the 12 people attacking him at the same time, and his heart sank. However, at this moment, a blood-red sword rainbow that pierced through the heavens and earth, cut off the sun and moon, suddenly swept over from the west at an extreme speed. On this sword rainbow, a domineering and sharp sword essence shot up into the sky, dragging a long flame tail, as if it had split the sky in half. It was extremely brilliant. The blood-red sword rainbow broke through the clouds above the 9-layer cloud summit and arrived in an instant. In an instant, whether it was the ninth Culpa King or the people who were rushing over, all of them stopped what they were doing and narrowed their eyes to look at the sword rainbow. Who is this person? I've never seen this sword Dao aura in the ruins. What does this person want to do? Could it be that the ninth Culpa King's enemy wants to take advantage of the situation and take a share of the loot? Ruler Silver Rock and the others exchanged glances. In the next moment, the sword rainbow stopped and the dazzling light gradually dissipated, revealing a black-haired young man. The young man's eyes were cold. He was wearing a wide hood and his black clothes were fluttering. He held a blood-red sword in his hand and carried an ancient sword case on his back. It's him. A fourth-stage chief ruler. The ruler Silver Rock, Lord Jinan. And the others exchanged a glance and frowned. Who is this person? The third prince had never seen Jian Wushuang before, so he asked. The Silver Rock ruler replied, Third prince, you may not know this, but 1,000 years ago, when we fought the 9th Kulpa King in the Fengyang Canyon, it was this man who stopped Qing Shuzi. In the end, Qing Shuzi chased after him. Unexpectedly, he returned safely, but Qing Shuzi's whereabouts are still unknown. I saw him on the plain just now, but I didn't pay much attention to him. I didn't expect this man to come here. A look of displeasure flashed across the ruler Silver Rock's eyes. In his opinion, Jian Wushuang should not have appeared here. What are the divine armor guards doing? They can't even stop a fourth-stage chief ruler. The ruler Silver Rock shook his head, but he did not mind. In his opinion, Jian Wushuang's battle strength was good, but it was difficult for him to change anything in the current situation. The 9th Kulpa King and Jian Wushuang stood side by side. One of them had white hair while the other had black hair. Jian Wushuang, what are you doing here? The 9th Kulpa King looked sideways at Jian Wushuang and asked with a blank expression. Jian Wushuang curled his lips and sneered. If I don't come, do you think I'll just watch you die? Upon hearing this, the 9th Kulpa King felt warm in his heart and sighed with emotion. He had not expected that the one who would come to save him in the end would be Jian Wushuang, who had been his enemy in the Divine Life Palace. However, the 9th Kulpa King snorted heavily and said, Humph, who am I, the 9th Kulpa King? Do you think I need you to save me? Hearing this, Jian Wushuang laughed. 9th Kulpa King had always been proud and aloof. In other words, he would suffer for his pride. Naturally, Jian Wushuang would not argue with 9th Kulpa King. 9th Kulpa King, let's cut to the chase. There are 12 of them in total. You kill 6 and I kill 6. How about it? Jian Wushuang smiled. Upon hearing this, the 9th Kulpa King laughed heartily, feeling the heroic spirit in his heart soaring to the sky. He laughed heartily and said, Jian Wushuang, are you sure you can do it? Will it work? Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and sneered. Then you just wait and see. As soon as he finished speaking, a cold light flashed in Jian Wushuang's eyes. He immediately rushed toward the third prince with his sword. 9th Kulpa King, leave this person to me. All right. The 9th Kulpa King nodded. He took a step forward and rushed toward the Blood Nether emissaries. These 9 Blood Nether emissaries had long annoyed him. Now he only wanted to kill them. The third prince looked at Jian Wushuang, who was rushing toward him, and let out a soft groan. This little fellow actually wants to kill me? The third prince chuckled. Although he did not know why Jian Wushuang's first target was him, he did not care at all. He was just a fourth-stage great ruler. How strong could he be? You don't know what's good for you. The third prince shook his head. He did not even bother to use the dragon pattern jade seal. He simply slapped at Jian Wushuang. Boom! He had only used 30% of his power, but it was enough to kill an ordinary ultimate ruler, not to mention a fourth-stage ruler like Jian Wushuang. In his opinion, this palm was enough to kill Jian Wushuang completely. Idiot! Jian Wushuang sneered and flicked the Wuxia divine sword in his hand. A cold sword light immediately broke the palm. Then Jian Wushuang jumped and appeared above the third prince's head in an instant. He said coldly, Die! Whoosh! A blood moon sword light suddenly slashed out along the Wuxia divine sword. This sword strike was enough to destroy the 100,000 mountains. What? The third prince was shocked. He had no time to dodge and could only raise the dragon imperial seal to block it. Clang! The crisp sound of metal clashing rang out, creating a long trail of golden sparks. Then, the dragon imperial jade seal and the third prince were sent flying. They crashed onto the ground and created a huge pit. A cold light flashed in Jian Wushuang's eyes. Without any hesitation, his body shot out like a cannonball and continued to kill the third prince on the ground. How is this possible? The third prince staggered to his feet and lowered his head to look at the dragon-patterned jade seal. He saw that on the dragon-patterned jade seal, where the Wuxia divine sword had hacked out, a faint black hole had appeared. How can that sword's offensive power be so strong? How high is its grade? The third prince was shocked. The dragon-patterned jade seal was an upper-grade nomological supreme treasure, but it had been cut by the Wuxia divine sword. This meant that the Wuxia divine sword was of a higher grade than this dragon-patterned jade seal. Bang! Before he could think further, Jian Wushuang had already charged at him again with his sword. The third prince's expression was serious. He no longer had any contempt in his heart. He shouted in a low voice, "Great divine bestowment technique! Seal of mountains and rivers!" Boom! In an instant, an extremely overbearing aura exploded with the third prince as the center. A huge throne appeared under the third prince. Sitting on the throne, the third prince looked like an emperor who controlled the mountains and rivers. Boundless domineering aura surged out. The dragon-patterned jade seal rose up and expanded with the wind. In a few breaths, it turned into a majestic mountain and pressed down on Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang raised his head and looked at the majestic mountain. His eyes flashed with fighting intent. The third prince was the strongest opponent he had ever faced in his entire life. Even though his strength had improved by leaps and bounds, he still did not dare to underestimate him. "Sword, rise!" Jian Wushuang shouted in a low voice. In an instant, his black hair under his hood flew up, and the wind, clouds, and dust in the air all turned into the purest energy in the world. Like 100 rivers flowing back, it came from all directions and finally gathered in his hand, turning into a silver sword rainbow that was 5,000 feet long. Jian Wushuang had comprehended this move in the trial arena when he was fighting with the 9th Kulpa King. It had taken shape in the Dao Comprehension River and forced Qing Shuzi to retreat in the Taro ruins. This sword was nameless, but it was Jian Wushuang's first killing sword skill. The sword move was not perfect. However, after Jian Wushuang had consumed the 9-leaf swordgrass in the 2nd level of the Taro ruins, his sword principle cultivation had skyrocketed. After breaking through to the 3rd level of sword principle origin, it was finally approaching maturity. This sword had a name today. It was called Sundering Stars. Whether it was the Wuxia divine sword in Jian Wushuang's hand that had been greatly improved in grade or his deeper comprehension of the origin of sword principle, the power of Jian Wushuang's star slashing had undergone a tremendous change. Jian Wushuang stood in the void, holding a 1,500-meter-long silver sword rainbow. He looked up at the dragon-patterned jade seal that had turned into a mountain, took a deep breath, and spat out 2 words, "Sundering Stars." In an instant, Jian Wushuang raised his arm and infused the Wuxia divine sword with dense and mysterious universe laws and boundless divine power. Then he slashed down at the mountain. At this moment, waves of unparalleled cold sword essence shot up into the sky and directly shattered the thick clouds within 100 feet. Then the Wuxia divine sword trembled hundreds of millions of times. A sound similar to the weeping of gods and the low chanting of Buddhas and demons came from Wuxia. The silver sword rainbow finally hacked down on the mountain formed by the dragon-patterned jade armor. Ding 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 ding. In an instant, the silver sword rainbow and the dragon-patterned jade seal collided over 1,000 times in a row, letting out a series of unpleasant metal colliding sounds. The mountain formed by the dragon-patterned jade and the silver sword rainbow did not give way to each other. They were constantly separated and collided with each other. The third prince raised his head and stared at the scene as if he was facing a great enemy. Jian Wushuang also squinted his eyes and did not dare to relax his expression. Kacha kacha kacha. Gradually, the sword light of the 1,500-meter-long silver sword rainbow dimmed, and the mountain formed by the dragon-patterned jade hairpin was covered with cobweb-like cracks. Bang! With a loud explosion, the power of the Sundering Stars sword was completely obliterated. The mountain let out a wail and shot back into the third prince's hand. The third prince was pushed back 1,000 feet, his legs leaving 2 deep trenches on the ground. He looked down at the dragon-patterned jade seal in his hand, and his eyes were filled with horror as if he had seen a ghost. The dragon-patterned jade seal was covered with no less than 100 fine cracks. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang could not help but sigh. The power of this sword could even kill dozens of ultimate rulers in front of it. However, it could not kill the third prince in one stroke. The third prince is truly an invincible existence amongst the ultimate rulers. He also has the backing of the Defeng Divine Kingdom, so he's truly powerful. I'm not his match. At this moment, the third prince had a thought that even he himself found absurd. He was the third prince of the Defeng Divine Kingdom, an unparalleled existence among the ultimate rulers. How could he not be a match for a fourth-stage ruler? The third prince could not believe it, but when he looked at Jian Wushuang, who had not taken a step back from the beginning to the end, he had to admit this fact. "Who are you?" the third prince said with a dark expression. "Jian Wushuang." Jian Wushuang glanced at him and replied indifferently. The third prince's eyes flickered as he said, "Jian Wushuang? Very good. Why don't we make a deal?" "Oh." Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and said with a faint smile, "What deal?" The third prince took a deep breath and seemed to have made a decision. He replied, "Jian Wushuang, I can withdraw from the matter of the 9th Culpa King and we will stop here." "How is it?" The third prince already had the intention to retreat. In his opinion, it was easy for them to kill the 9th Culpa King before, so he did not mind stepping on him and taking a share of the loot. But in front of him, Jian Wushuang's strength was heaven-defying, and it was very likely that he could keep him here. So, how could he be willing to give up his noble life here for a mere 9th Culpa King? Hearing this, Jian Wushuang suddenly laughed. The third prince's suggestion was indeed good. He had no enmity with the 9th Culpa King or even Jian Wushuang. If he could withdraw now, it would indeed be a good thing for the 9th Culpa King and Jian Wushuang. But it was a pity. "No." Jian Wushuang shook his head. The third prince frowned and asked, "Why?" "Third prince," Jian Wushuang replied with a faint smile, "it seems that you still don't understand why I came to you first." "What?" The third prince squinted his eyes. He did not expect to go so quickly. He did not know why Jian Wushuang would look for him first. Speaking of which, this was the first time they had met. Even if Jian Wushuang wanted to find an opponent, he should not have looked for him. Jian Wushuang also revealed the answer to him. "Do you still remember Water Sorcerer Ruler?" Jian Wushuang said indifferently. "Water Sorcerer Ruler?" The third prince frowned. He had seen too many rulers, but he did not have much of an impression of the others, except for a few famous and unparalleled rulers. After a long time, he seemed to remember that not long after he had arrived at the Taro ruins, a 5th-stage ruler had accidentally blocked his way and been killed by him with a single palm. Before this person died, he seemed to have mentioned that his master was the Water Sorcerer Ruler. Afterward, he seemed to have heard that the Water Sorcerer had come to find him, demanding an explanation. As the third prince of the Great Feng Divine Empire, how could he possibly receive someone like that? As a result, he had Ruler Horned Flame and the others under his command throw Ruler Water and his 2 disciples out. "Are you here for Water Sorcerer Ruler?" The third prince narrowed his eyes. "Not bad." Jian Wushuang nodded calmly. "Ha ha 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 ha. What a joke. What a joke. Jian Wushuang, you want to kill me for an ant?" The third prince suddenly laughed out loud, laughing so hard that his back was bent. He felt that this was the biggest joke in his life. What sort of status did Water Sorcerer Ruler have? A useless ruler from who knows which remote corner of the universe. And who was he? He was the third prince of the Great God Nation, a top-tier god nation in the universe. He had a distinguished status and was respected by tens of thousands of people. Jian Wushuang wanted to kill him just because he had killed a disciple of Water Sorcerer Ruler? Jian Wushuang calmly looked at the third prince, who was laughing like a madman, and slowly said, "You see them as ants, but do I not see you as one? What did you just say? You dare to treat me like an ant?" The third prince suddenly lowered his head and stared at Jian Wushuang with a cold expression. Jian Wushuang did not answer him. Instead, He slowly let go of the Wuxia divine sword in his hand and said, "The light vanished into the deepest darkness, the power that could strip away everything. Its name is Eternal Night, Wang." There was no earth-shaking explosion, nor was there an explosion that made the world pale. When Jian Wushuang finished speaking, it was like a small stone was thrown into the calm water, causing circles of ripples. Starting from the tip of the sword, the Wuxia divine sword began to disappear inch by inch. Jian Wushuang slowly closed his eyes. The Wuxia divine sword floated in front of Jian Wushuang. Starting from the tip of the sword, it turned into nothingness inch by inch. It did not shatter. Instead, it seemed to transform into the energy of the world until the entire sword disappeared completely without a sound. The third prince did not know why, but he suddenly felt a terrifying sense of threat. This threat was far stronger than any of his previous encounters. His forehead began to break out in a cold sweat, and a trace of uneasiness rose in his heart. He could not help but look in the direction of the ninth Culpa King, Lord Jinan, and the others and shouted, "Silver Rock, quickly come and help me!" On the ninth Culpa King's battlefield, the Silver Rock could not help but frown. The third prince was a well-known, invincible ultimate ruler in the universe. How could he not be able to deal with a mere fourth-stage great ruler? Even to the point where he needed help? Trash! The ruler Silver Rock cursed in his heart, but he still turned to the Lord Jinan and said, "Your Highness, the third prince seems to be in trouble. Please help him." Lord Jinan nodded and looked at Jian Wushuang in the distance with a cruel smile. Well, he did not want to face the ninth Culpa King anyway, so he might as well start with this fourth-stage ruler kid. "Your Highness, this king has come to help you," Lord Jinan shouted at the third prince. He took a step forward and turned into a beam of divine light, appearing beside the third prince in an instant. "Your Highness, are you all right?" The Lord Jinan glanced at him. "I'm fine," the third prince replied. His expression did not soften with the arrival of Lord Jinan. "Your Highness, there's something strange about this kid." The third prince took a deep breath. He could feel that the threat and uneasiness he felt had not decreased even after the arrival of Lord Jinan. "Strange." Lord Jinan was stunned for a moment before he laughed and said, "Your Highness, how strange can a mere fourth-stage chief ruler be? You're overthinking, aren't you?" After saying that, Lord Jinan looked at Jian Wushuang, who was standing in the void in the distance with his eyes closed. Suddenly, as if he felt something, he said in surprise, "Eh? I didn't notice it before, but the Sword Dao aura on this kid's body is the same as the aura that the people who killed Star Ruler and Heavenly Ruler saw. Could it be that the person with the big secret that Star Ruler and Heavenly Ruler mentioned is this guy? Fine. I'd like to see what's so special about this strange man who has a big secret." With that, Lord Jinan sneered and stretched out his giant hand to grab Jian Wushuang. "You're just pretending to be a ghost. Come over here." Boom! Before Lord Jinan could catch Jian Wushuang suddenly opened his eyes. There were no pupils or whites in his eyes, only a void of darkness. Wisps of black fog as thick as ink began to spread from under Jian Wushuang's feet, dyeing the entire void black. Then they slowly surged toward Lord Jinan and the third prince. The next moment, Jian Wushuang said softly, "Strip me of my power, Wang." Like a stone falling into the water, it created ripples. The world in front of Lord Jinan and the third prince suddenly changed. It was as if they were the only two people left in the world. In their eyes, time began to accelerate, and everything around them gradually faded. The world seemed to be covered in a thick haze. And this was only the beginning. The color of the world continued to deepen. Gradually, it turned from gray to black. The black continued to deepen until it was as dark as ink. There was no light in their eyes. The Lord Jinan and the third prince felt like they had fallen into an eternal dark kingdom. In this kingdom, there was no light, no vitality, and no hope. Only the oppressive, dull, dead, cold, and stiff auras began to entangle them. The Lord Jinan and the third prince suddenly felt a strong sense of uneasiness in their hearts under this complicated aura. "You're acting mysterious," Lord Jinnan's face turned ugly as he coldly snorted and shouted, "Divine Sun Wheel, break for this king!" Whoosh! The two sun-like divine wheels behind him suddenly shot up like two balls of fire and smashed into the darkness. However, this divine sun wheel, which was usually majestic, was like a tiny spark that fell into the vast ocean. It did not even cause a wave before it was gradually extinguished. An invisible force deprived the divine sun wheel of its power. Then, under Lord Jinnan's furious gaze, the two divine wheels, which were top-grade supreme treasures of laws, began to decline in grade. High grade, middle grade, low grade. In just a few seconds, the two divine wheels turned from high-grade nomological supreme treasures to dull ordinary weapons. In the end, they broke down and turned into nothingness. The Lord Jinnan and the third prince looked at each other, their eyes filled with disbelief. They had never heard of such a strange power that could make a nomological supreme treasure fall into an ordinary weapon without a sound. Before they could think further, what happened next made them cry out in horror. The surging divine power in their bodies disappeared at an extremely fast speed. It was as if a pair of invisible hands were taking away everything from them. No! The Lord Jinnan and the third prince's expressions changed drastically, and they no longer dared to hide their trump cards. Forbidden technique, Blood Sun, Great Bestowment Secret Technique, Emperor's Seal. A huge scarlet fireball, like the sun, exuded a terrifyingly hot aura as it rose up from the void. In the void, a huge throne that could suppress the starry sky appeared. On the huge throne, there was a blurry figure wearing a 9-clawed golden dragon king robe and a dragon crown on his head. His face could not be seen clearly, and he was extremely majestic. This was the Prince of the South and the third prince's strongest trump card. However, it was all useless. In this absolute darkness, all light would be lost. The blood-red sun only lasted for less than 10 breaths before its flames were extinguished. It turned into the purest divine power energy and was devoured by the darkness. The tall and majestic emperor's figure was even more vulnerable. After the darkness attached itself to it, it silently crumbled and disappeared. Lord Jinnan and the third prince's divine power gradually dried up. Their tall and burly bodies quickly shriveled up as if their flesh and blood had been sucked dry. From the outside, one would see a huge black ball in the sky. The black sword Qi, which was as black as ink, interwove together like a big net and wrapped Jian Wushuang, Lord Jinnan, and the third prince in it. Time passed slowly. On the 9th Kulpa King's side, as the third prince and Lord Jinnan were lured away by Jian Wushuang, the pressure on the 9th Kulpa King suddenly disappeared. Not only did he not show any signs of being suppressed, but he was also like a world-destroying mad dragon. After activating his innate divine ability, Demon God Evolution, his battle strength increased tenfold. He struck out his palms like a storm and suppressed the 9 blood underworld messengers and the ruler Silver Rock with his own power. Lord Jinnan, the third prince, and the divine armor guards, what the hell are they doing? The ruler Silver Rock's face turned extremely pale. He had expected that they would be responsible for holding back the 9th Kulpa King. After the divine armor guards had finished dealing with the forces under the 9th Kulpa King, they would turn around and kill him together. But now, there was no news from the divine armor guards. The third prince, who was fighting against Jian Wushuang, and Lord Jinnan, who had gone to help the third prince. The ruler Silver Rock's eyes flickered. He looked at Lord Jinnan, the third prince, and Jian Wushuang as he fought against the 9th Kulpa King with the 9 blood messengers. In the void, Lord Jinnan, the third prince, and Jian Wushuang had all disappeared. What was left was a huge round black ball. The 3 of them were inside the black ball, but there was no aura coming from them. The situation has changed. I might have to leave first again. The ruler Silver Rock's thoughts raced. He had always been a cautious person. Otherwise, he would not have been the only one in his clan who had escaped from the 9th Kulpa King. The situation in front of him had completely deviated from his expected trajectory, so he had a hint of retreat in his heart. As for the 9th Kulpa King, he was also paying attention to Jian Wushuang's movements. He turned his head to look at the huge black ball that was like a spider web where Jian Wushuang was. He could not help but raise his eyebrows. Could this be a divine kingdom of one thought? The ninth Kulpa King muttered to himself in confusion. Others might not be able to see anything, but as someone who was half a step into the Supreme Being realm, he could naturally see that Jian Wushuang's black ball had clearly created a world that belonged to Jian Wushuang. That's not right. Although it's similar to One Thought Divine Kingdom, it's not One Thought Divine Kingdom. The ninth Kulpa King shook his head. As the one who comprehended the One Thought Divine Kingdom, he naturally had a deep understanding of it. The One Thought Divine Kingdom was an independent world with heaven, earth, mountains, rivers, and mountains. However, Jian Wushuang's black ball space was filled with cold, dead, and lifeless aura. This aura made even him feel a little apprehensive. In a short 1,000 years, this guy has grown to this extent. The ninth Kulpa King shook his head, and a smile appeared on his face. How can we let him win? The next moment, One Thought Divine Kingdom. Rise, rumble. All of a sudden, heaven and earth lost their color. An unprecedented powerful aura suddenly exploded with the ninth Kulpa King as the center. This aura was completely different from the aura of the ninth Kulpa King. It was filled with a feeling of the mysterious Great Tao. The void in the Taro ruins seemed to be unable to withstand this aura, and it made a ka-ka sound similar to glass breaking. Immediately, the surrounding space of the trial arena began to change. With the ninth Kulpa King as the center, a huge and magnificent power directly extended out. This power was enough to suffocate any resident and make them tremble in fear. This is the One Thought Divine Kingdom that only supreme martial artists can comprehend. Not good. Quickly run. Ruler Silver Rock's face instantly fell. At this moment, even the emissaries, who had been expressionless the whole time, were shocked. They said in a deep voice, "Ninth Kulpa King, let us go, and Blood Sky Palace will not look for you again. We will not pursue the past anymore." They could already see that it was absolutely impossible to take down the ninth Kulpa King today, unless the Lord Jinan and the third prince could kill Jian Wushuang to help. Leave? Does your Blood Sky Palace not care about the past? Ha 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 ha, who do you think I, the ninth Kulpa King, am? A piece of trash that you can do whatever you want? What a joke! After saying that, the ninth Kulpa King's expression turned into one of ridicule as he said, "Blood Nether Emissary, I'm telling you, none of you are going to leave today. I'll flatten the Blood Sky Palace one day." How audacious! Impudent! In an instant, the 9 Blood Nether emissaries flew into a rage and shouted, "All of you, come in!" The ninth Kulpa King sneered and put his hands together. In an instant, more than 10 black chains shot out from the One Thought Divine Kingdom, rolling up the 9 Blood Underworld envoys and the Ruler Silver Rock, and pulling them into the realm of the One Thought Divine Kingdom. As time slowly passed, the most intense and spectacular battle in the Taro ruins suddenly became extremely quiet. After about half an incense's time, kacha kacha kacha, the ninth Kulpa King's divine kingdom shattered into pieces. Immediately after, 6 figures shot out from the boundary of the divine kingdom. These 6 people were the ninth Kulpa King, the ruler Silver Rock, and the 4 Blood Nether emissaries. In the time it took for half an incense stick to burn, the ninth Kulpa King had killed 5 Blood Nether emissaries in succession under the suppression of the One Thought Divine Kingdom. The remaining ruler Silver Rock and the 5 Blood Messengers were in a sorry state. The ruler Silver Rock only had 12 of his 36 golden spears left, while the 5 Blood Messengers' black robes were torn apart, revealing 5 ugly and bloody faces. Run! The ruler Silver Rock's expression was extremely ugly. Just now, he had almost died at the hands of the ninth Kulpa King. If he had not made a prompt decision to destroy the 24 golden spears, he would have died at the hands of the ninth Kulpa King, just like the 5 unlucky Blood Underworld envoys. This caused him to completely lose the courage to continue fighting. With a wave of his hand, he released a red poisonous mist, and his figure quickly swept toward a place. "You want to escape again this time?" The ninth Kulpa King had long hated the ruler Silver Rock to the core. He was someone he wanted to kill, so how could he let him escape? The ninth Culpa King took a step forward and was about to chase after the ruler's silver rock when he saw the 4 blood nether emissaries charge at him with venomous eyes, blocking his way. You don't know your place. The ninth Culpa King was furious. These blood nether emissaries were like dogskin plaster. They did not know life and death and did not know fear, which made him extremely disgusted. Ruler Silver Rock turned his head around to take note of what was happening, and he could not help but gloat. Humph, as expected. The heavens didn't want to kill me. The Silver Rock. He laughed proudly. However, he did not notice that the direction he was rushing in was where Jian Wushuang was. Jian Wushuang slowly opened his eyes. As Jian Wushuang opened his eyes, the darkness in his eyes gradually faded and he regained his clarity. The huge black ball crumbled into pieces and turned into the black fog sword Qi, which rushed toward Jian Wushuang from all directions. The Lord Jinan and the third prince had already become 2 dried corpses. Their eyes were wide open and their mouths were wide open. Their faces were filled with fear, as if they had experienced something extremely terrifying before they died. With Eternal Night, Jian Wushuang had killed 2 ultimate rulers at the unrivaled level. Once this news spread, it would be enough to cause an uproar in the entire universe. Qi, 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 Qi. The snake-like black mist gathered in front of Jian Wushuang and finally turned into the blood-red Wuxia divine sword. Jian Wushuang's face was a little pale. He grabbed the pancake of divine weeping sword and panted slightly. Instantly, his originally pale face seemed to have received some kind of replenishment, and a demonic flush surged up. It was still too difficult for me to use this sword. However, its power is truly extraordinary. Jian Wushuang could not help but smile. He had only comprehended a little bit of Eternal Night, but he had already killed Lord Jinan and the third prince. If he really comprehended Eternal Night completely, how powerful would he be? As Jian Wushuang was thinking, he slowly turned around and looked at the ninth Culpa King. He saw a figure running toward him with all his might, his head lowered. Silver Rock. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang could not help but smile sarcastically. Humph, the ninth Culpa King is really terrifying. It seems that if I want to take revenge, I'll have to wait until I break through to the supreme martial artist level. The ruler Silver Rock lowered his head and continued to fly forward as he pondered his next step. He definitely couldn't stay in the Taro ruins anymore. The first thing he had to do was to leave the Taro ruins, find a remote corner in the universe, and stay there for 80,000 to 100,000 years. After this storm had passed, he would come out and look for a chance to take revenge. Victory was already in my grasp. If it weren't for the third prince and Lord Jinan, those 2 idiots who couldn't even take care of a 4th stage great ruler, I wouldn't have to run away now. A flash of hatred appeared in the Silver Rock's eyes. Originally, he had already felt that victory was in his hands. According to his plan, even if the ninth Culpa King did not die, he would probably only be left with 1 breath. In the end, the guy who dominated the 4th stage came out of nowhere and reversed the entire battle situation with his own power. Just as he lowered his head and was thinking about putting Jian Wushuang on his must-kill list the next time he came out to seek revenge, he suddenly staggered and stopped. What? He looked up in confusion. Hello, Ruler Silver Rock. Before he could raise his head, a cold voice suddenly sounded in his ear. Jian Wushuang looked expressionlessly at the ruler Silver Rock, who had taken the initiative to come to him. The corners of his mouth pulled up into an indifferent arc. It's you. The ruler Silver Rock was shocked. He turned around to look at the ninth Culpa King, who was being pestered by the 4 blood messengers. Then he turned to Jian Wushuang and sneered. Good. I didn't expect to see you again before I leave. Go to hell. Boom. The ruler Silver Rock took out a golden spear and shot it at Jian Wushuang's head. Idiot. Jian Wushuang shook his head. He did not even bother to use the Wuxia divine sword. Instead, he reached out to grab the ruler Silver Rock. The ruler Silver Rock's power was weaker than Lord Jinan and the others. In addition, his divine power was almost exhausted after fighting with the ninth Culpa King. How could he be Jian Wushuang's opponent? In just a short while, Jian Wushuang grabbed the ruler Silver Rock by the neck as if he was a little chick. The ruler Silver Rock's hands and feet were flailing wildly in the air as he roared in anger. "You let me go! Kid! I told you to let me go!" Ruler Silver Rock roared, his face red. What a disgrace! He was an ultimate ruler, but Jian Wushuang was carrying him like a little chick. It was a great humiliation for him. Bang! Jian Wushuang gave him a slap in response. "Be quiet. Kid, let me go, and I'll give you all the treasures I've collected in the Taro ruins. What do you think?" Ruler Silver Rock forced out a laugh as he tried to give in. Bang! It was still a slap. "I told you to be quiet. If you dare to make any more noise, do you believe that I will send you to your subordinates and the Lord Jinan?" Jian Wushuang glanced at him and said coldly, What? Ruler Silver Rock was stunned for a moment. Immediately after, he suddenly reacted, as if his body had fallen into an ice cellar. A chill ran from his spine to the top of his head. Could it be that the divine armor guards who had not come to help for a long time had already died in his hands? Could it be that the Lord Jinan and the third prince? He suddenly turned his head and saw two mummies lying not far from where Jian Wushuang had been standing. The two dried corpses were the third prince and Lord Jinan. Whoa! The blood drained from the Silver Rock's face in an instant, and his face turned pale. Indescribable shock filled his eyes. Nearly 100 ultimate rulers, as well as unparalleled ultimate rulers like Lord Jinan and the third prince, had all been killed by this man. Ruler Silver Rock was completely terrified. Only then did he realize that he had been wrong from the very beginning, ridiculously wrong. Because of his preconceived notion, he had never taken Jian Wushuang seriously from beginning to end. In the beginning, he had thought that Jian Wushuang had been lucky enough to escape the divine armor guards and come here. Later on, when Lord Jinan and the third prince fought against Jian Wushuang and did not move for a long time, he only thought that Jian Wushuang had some kind of heaven-defying ability to trap people and temporarily trapped Lord Jinan and the third prince. He had never thought that the divine armor guards, the 100 ultimate rulers, Lord Jinan, and the third prince would die at the hands of Jian Wushuang. This was too shocking and too unbelievable. If this news were to spread, the entire universe would be shaken. Therefore, it was not that he did not think of this, but he did not dare to think in this direction at all. He had never heard of a fourth-stage ruler killing two invincible ultimate rulers. Even the most famous supreme beings in the universe, including the owner of the Taro ruins, Taro Supreme, had never achieved such a glorious and valiant battle record when he had been a fourth-level ruler. All of this subverted his understanding. Freak! This is a monster! The ruler Silver Rock looked up at Jian Wushuang in fear. At that moment, he was even more afraid of Jian Wushuang than he was of the Ninth Kulpa King. He believed that even the Ninth Kulpa King, who was known as the invincible ruler now, could not be compared with Jian Wushuang when he was a ruler at the fourth level. Boom! 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 In the distance, the battle between the Ninth Kulpa King and the 4 Blood Nether emissaries was almost over. If the 9 Blood Nether emissaries were still here, they could still deal with the Ninth Kulpa King for a while. Now that there were only 4 of them left, how could they be his opponent? In just a few minutes, the 4 Blood Nether emissaries had fallen one by one, unable to even escape. Humph! A bunch of disgusting guys. After the Ninth Kulpa King's final palm strike turned a Blood Nether emissary and his sickle into dust, he snorted with an unsightly expression and turned to look in the direction where the ruler Silver Rock had escaped. Jian Wushuang. When the Ninth Kulpa King saw the ruler Silver Rock in Jian Wushuang's hand, he was stunned. How are you going to thank me? Jian Wushuang lifted up the ruler Silver Rock and shook it in front of Ninth Kulpa King with a smile. The Ninth Kulpa King snorted and did not reply. However, a smile appeared on his expressionless face. Jian Wushuang carried the ruler Silver Rock and walked toward the Ninth Kulpa King. The ruler Silver Rock's face turned ashen. Here, I'll leave him to you. Jian Wushuang stretched out his hand and handed over the ruler Silver Rock to the Ninth Kulpa King. All of a sudden, the Ninth Kulpa King looked down at the ruler Silver Rock, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a cold arc. Silver Rock, run. Why aren't you running anymore? Ruler Silver Rock's face was drained of all color. He knew that he would not be able to escape today. When it came to begging for mercy, he could beg for mercy from anyone but the ninth Culpa King. This was his last dignity. Therefore, he took a deep breath and said lightly, "Ninth Culpa King, I can only say that I'm unlucky to die in your hands this time. I don't have a good helper like you. Do it." The ninth Culpa King had never been a sloppy person. After shaking his head with a sneer, he suddenly slapped the head of the ruler Silver Rock. Boom, boom, boom. Vast amounts of divine power exploded forth, instantly obliterating the ruler Silver Rock into dust. With the death of the ruler Silver Rock, the battle finally came to an end. A moment later, the sky returned to its clear and quiet state. The ninth Culpa King and Jian Wushuang were fighting side by side. The slight breeze blew their black and white hair. "Jian Wushuang, I owe you a favor this time." The ninth Culpa King put his hands behind his back, stepped into the void, and said in a deep voice. Jian Wushuang smiled but did not reply. Upon seeing this, the ninth Culpa King no longer said anything. Only he himself knew how heavy the favor he was talking about was. This meant that no matter what kind of life-and-death enemy Jian Wushuang faced in the future, he, the ninth Culpa King, would do his best to stand behind Jian Wushuang. Even if he had to be the enemy of the entire universe, he would not hesitate to do so. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. It did not take long for Divine Marquis Qingfeng to rush over with more than 10 ultimate gods. Only now did they manage to wipe out the ruler Silver Rock, Lord Jinan, and the third prince, all of the ultimate rulers under their command. Ninth Culpa King, Jian Wushuang, are you all right? Divine Marquis Qingfeng stood in front of Jian Wushuang and ninth Culpa King and asked with concern. Do we look like we're in trouble? Jian Wushuang joked with a smile. Divine Marquis Qingfeng heaved a sigh of relief and his eyes lit up. He was not sure, but he asked with anticipation. Then what about the Silver Rock? He's dead. He's dead. The ninth Culpa King nodded. Divine Marquis Qingfeng's expression turned excited as he asked, Then what about Lord Jinan and the others? They're all dead. The ninth Culpa King continued to reply. Divine Marquis Qingfeng's body trembled at first, but then he burst out laughing. The next day, as promised, the ninth Culpa King divided all the treasures of the ruler Silver Rock and his subordinates, the ultimate rulers, to the Spear River ruler and the others. Immediately, the Spear River ruler and the other ultimate rulers were overjoyed and celebrated. Not long after, the ninth Culpa King, Jian Wushuang, and Divine Marquis Qingfeng all decided to leave the Taro ruins. For ninth Culpa King, it was the right way to go back and use the supreme divine medicine to break through to the supreme level. For Jian Wushuang, the biggest opportunity in the Taro ruins had been obtained by him, so there was naturally no need to stay. It did not matter whether Divine Marquis Qingfeng stayed or not. 3 days later, the three of them stepped out of the Taro ruins. Outside the Taro ruins, it was still a lively scene. Some restaurants, elixir dispensaries, and trading markets were crowded with people. All the major forces had set up camp here, and the 9 Emperor Pavilion was the most conspicuous. Jian Wushuang and the other two had deliberately concealed their auras, so no one recognized them. Let's go, he said. Just as ninth Culpa King was about to release Universe Boat and leave. Wait! Jian Wushuang shook his head and looked at the 9 Emperor Pavilion. I still have something to deal with. Give me a moment. All right, he said. Ninth Culpa King nodded. He naturally agreed to Jian Wushuang's request. Mixed in with the crowd, Jian Wushuang slightly lowered his hood and walked into the 9 Emperor Pavilion. Sir, what do you need to buy? We have all kinds of treasures from the ruins, including all kinds of special divine medicine. The person in charge of the reception was a beautiful 5th stage Great Emperor woman. Although she saw that Jian Wushuang was only a 4th stage ruler, she did not look down on him. Before she could finish, she saw Jian Wushuang take out a token with the words 9th Emperor on it, and her face suddenly changed. An expert on the 9 Emperor list? This way, please. The beautiful lady's tone immediately became respectful. She quickly brought Jian Wushuang to the top floor of the 9 Emperor Pavilion and said respectfully, Sir, I've already informed the supervisor. He'll be here soon. Jian Wushuang sat on a futon and nodded. A short and fat old man hurried over after a while. He first checked Jian Wushuang's token of the 9 Emperor list, then carefully returned the token to Jian Wushuang and said, "Mr. Blood Sword, what can we do for you?" Jian Wushuang took out a broken purple gold crown from his interspatial ring and said, "I'll have to trouble you to help me deliver something." Eh? The crown. It seems to be worn by the 3rd prince of the Defeng Divine Kingdom. The fat old man was shocked. As the manager of the 9 Emperor Pavilion branch in the Taro ruins, he naturally had good eyesight. He recognized the broken purple gold crown at a glance. It was once worn by the 3rd prince of the Defeng Divine Kingdom. How did this crown end up in this person's hands? The fat old man was suspicious, but he did not dare to ask, "Your Excellency, may I ask where you are sending it?" "Send this purple gold crown to the Mountain Sun Astral in the Void Wind Starfield. It'll be enough if you send it to a ruler called the Water Sorcerer," Jian Wushuang said. "Void Wind Star area? Your Excellency, the Void Wind Star area is at the edge of the universe. It's very far from here. If you—" the fat old man said with embarrassment. "Can't you send it over?" Before he could finish, Jian Wushuang said indifferently, "This?" The fat old man hesitated for a moment before he took a deep breath. "Sir, it is possible to send it over. However, the price will be extremely expensive. It will require 200,000 universe origin stones." After saying that, the fat elder lowered his head and no longer looked at Jian Wushuang. It was not that he looked down on Jian Wushuang, but 200,000 universe origin stones was an astronomical figure to most of the ultimate rulers. Jian Wushuang was only a 4th-stage great ruler. He did not think that Jian Wushuang had any means to possess so many universe origin stones. "When can you ship it out?" Jian Wushuang took out an interspatial ring. The fat old man was stunned. He took the interspatial ring and started to check it. The next moment he was shocked. "I can make the arrangements immediately," the fat old man said. "Yes, as soon as possible." Jian Wushuang nodded. Then, he pulled down his hat and walked out of the 9 Emperor Pavilion. To him, the number of universe origin stones he had was just a number. In the 2nd level of the Taro ruins, he had obtained at least 100 million universe origin stones, and this did not include the divine medicines and materials. If all of them were added together and exchanged for universe origin stones, it would be an astronomical figure. Jian Wushuang did not care about 200,000 universe origin stones at all. "I hope they will like this gift." A smile appeared on Jian Wushuang's face that was hidden under the hood. After a while, Jian Wushuang came to the side of 9th Culpa King and 9th Culpa King. "Have you finished your business?" The 9th Culpa King said. "Yes." Jian Wushuang nodded. "All right, let's go then." 9th Culpa King waved his hand, and suddenly, a pitch-black universe boat appeared in front of the 3 of them. It then expanded with the wind and became a behemoth that could suppress the starry sky in the blink of an eye. 9th Culpa King, Divine Marquis Qingfeng, and Jian Wushuang took a step forward and flew into the sky, entering Universe Boat. Rumble. Immediately, Universe Boat rumbled and accelerated. In a few seconds, the universe turned into a small black dot and completely disappeared from the starry sky. Time passed by slowly, and in the blink of an eye 300 years had passed. One day, at the entrance of the Taro ruins, a super fleet with the flag of Taishu swept across the starry sky and suddenly drove into the entrance of the Taro ruins. It did not make any sense at all and crushed over. Immediately, the entrance to the Taro ruins was in chaos, and the countless ultimate rulers who had set up their stalls hurriedly moved out of the way. However, before they could roar, they kept quiet as if their throats were grabbed by an invisible hand. A line of top-tier ultimate rulers filed out of the fleet and stood respectfully under the huge universe boat with the flag of Great Void. Then, the cabin door of the largest universe boat opened slowly. An old man with white hair and a white beard walked down from the cabin door. He was wearing a white cloak with the words Great Void sewn on his back with fine gold thread. This elder's attire was exactly the same as Divine Sun Qingshuzi's. The only difference was that there was a golden wisteria flower embroidered on the left side of his chest. As soon as the old man walked out of Universe Boat, an extremely powerful aura instantly descended on the entire place. The countless ultimate rulers present all felt a chill run down their spines, as if their blood had been frozen. This is the Vice Hall Master of the 7th Hall of the Great Void Temple, Ruler Whitefloat. What? Some of the ultimate rulers in the crowd immediately paled and cried out in alarm. A supreme martial artist had arrived. This was the arrival of a supreme martial artist. The hearts of the many ultimate rulers present were filled with shock. Ruler Whitefloat was expressionless as he swept his gaze across the Omega rulers. He said in a calm voice, "I'm looking." In an instant, the rulers of the Great Void Temple standing respectfully in front of him responded with a loud yes. A large portion of them split off and shot toward the Tarot ruins. A small portion of them headed toward the nearby ultimate rulers. "Have you seen this person?" The Great Void Temple Master's expression was cold. He held a palm-sized profound light mirror in his hand as he continuously questioned the ultimate rulers present. The figure in the mirror was none other than Jian Wushuang. "I've never seen him." "I don't." The other ultimate rulers all shook their heads. However, those who had seen Jian Wushuang before recognized him immediately. Isn't this the little guy who came here with the 9th Culpa King and the others 1,000 years ago?" "That's right. I remember this person too. I have a deep impression of him. When they came, I even mocked him by the side, saying that he was a mere 4th stage ruler and that he had come to the Tarot ruins to seek death." "Didn't this person enter the Tarot ruins a long time ago?" As soon as these words were spoken, the many peak-level ultimate rulers of the Great Void Temple narrowed their eyes. A moment later, the rulers of the Great Void Temple who had entered the Tarot ruins emerged and stood in front of the ruler Whitefloat. "My lord, we didn't find that person's figure. My lord, I heard that the 9th Culpa King has left the Tarot ruins, and the person who is hunting down the Divine Sun must have left with him." Ruler Whitefloat nodded his head indifferently. He looked at the people who had said that they had seen Jian Wushuang before and said, "Take him away." Yes. In an instant, those who said that they knew Jian Wushuang were forcefully taken away by the peak ultimate rulers of the Great Void Temple. Not long after, the Great Void Temple fleet that was pressing down on the starry sky slowly turned around and headed in a certain direction. The direction of the voice was the Divine Life Palace. It was only after the fleet of the Great Void Temple had left that everyone heaved a sigh of relief. On the top floor of the 9 Emperor Pavilion, that fat elder stood in front of the railing. He looked at the Great Void Temple's fleet leaving with a complicated expression. They were well informed and naturally knew that the Divine Son of the Great Void Temple had pursued a stage 4 great ruler in the Tarot ruins, but his whereabouts were unknown. The whereabouts of the Divine Son of the Great Void Temple were unknown. The broken crown of the 3rd Prince of Defeng. When he connected the two together, the fat old man's heart skipped a beat. This person is a heaven's favorite on the 9 Emperor list of the 9 Emperor Pavilion. If he is in trouble. No, I must report this to that lord. The fat old man made a decision in his heart and hurriedly went downstairs. In the vast universe, a pitch-black universe boat was flying at high speed. The Bone Sea Star area is in front of us. After we go through the universe passage in the Bone Sea Star area, we will be closer to the Divine Palace. In the cabin of Universe Boat, the 9th Culpa King, Jian Wushuang, and Divine Marquis Qingfeng were looking at the void space through the dark light mirror of Universe Boat. It had been nearly 800 years since they left the Tarot ruins. They had been traveling through the universe passages and were getting closer and closer to the Divine Life Palace. Come to think of it, the source of all the trouble on this trip to the Tarot ruins was Divine Lord Xianxia and the others. If they hadn't left the team on their own accord, causing our strength to drop sharply in the Fengyang Canyon, then we wouldn't have been chased down. If they had worked together with us back then, we could have used our strength to get the Supreme Divine Herb back in the Fengyang Canyon. Divine Marquis Qingfeng sighed. Upon hearing this, the 9th Culpa King and Jian Wushuang smiled and did not speak. For Jian Wushuang, if Qing Shuzi had not chased after him, he would not have entered the second level of the Tarot ruins by accident and obtained the Tarot Sword Codex, and other universe treasures. Ninth Culpa King, if we are to talk about the harvest this time, among the three of us, you have obtained the most since you obtained the supreme divine medicine. When we return, you have to repay Jian Wushuang and me well. Divine Marquis Qingfeng joked in a sour tone. Ha ha ha, when have I, the Ninth Culpa King, ever been a stingy person? Don't worry. I'll definitely reward you handsomely when we return. Seeing that the Divine Life Palace was getting closer and closer, the Ninth Culpa King was in a good mood and made a rare joke. As he spoke, he turned his head and gave Jian Wushuang a meaningful look. If he had not seen the battle between Jian Wushuang, Lord Jinan, and the third prince, he would have thought that he was the biggest winner of this trip. However, from that battle, he could see that Jian Wushuang, who didn't show his strength, had definitely gained more than him. Just the divine power similar to the one-thought divine kingdom alone had surpassed everything he had gained from this trip to the Tarot ruins. However, he and Jian Wushuang had a tacit understanding not to say anything about this. Even when Divine Marquis Qingfeng asked about the details of the battle, the two of them would give a vague answer. The Ninth Culpa King understood that everyone in the world had their own secrets. Since Jian Wushuang did not take the initiative to tell him, he naturally would not ask. In any case, to him, that supreme divine medicine was the most suitable opportunity for him. As for what opportunities Jian Wushuang had obtained, it had nothing to do with him. The three of them chatted casually and closed their eyes to rest. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, another 100 years had passed. The surrounding universe void finally became bustling and lively. From time to time, they could see all kinds of universe boats passing by. The Divine Life Palace was finally right in front of him. Jian Wushuang slowly opened his eyes. From where they were, they could already see the Divine Kingdom controlled by the Divine Life Palace in the distance through the mystic light realm of the universe boat. I haven't seen you for such a long time. I wonder how Shuang-Er is doing now. Thinking of Lang Rushuang, Jian Wushuang couldn't help but smile and muttered to himself, after returning to the Divine Life Palace, my next step will be to break through to the fifth stage ruler realm. Jian Wushuang thought about it again. His cultivation level was no longer important. Whether it was the strength of his divine power or his comprehension of the principles of the universe, he had already reached the peak of the ruler realm. It was not difficult for Jian Wushuang to break through to the fifth stage ruler. He just had to integrate the eighth principle. Although the integration of principles of order became more and more difficult, Jian Wushuang had absolute confidence in himself. The reason why Jian Wushuang wanted to go back and break through to become a fifth stage ruler was that once he broke through, not only would his divine power increase again, but more importantly, he might be able to use 1/10,000,000th of the Tarot Divine Sword's power. At that time, even if he were to face the Ninth Culpa King, who was a level higher than him in the ruler realm, he was confident that he would be able to fight with all his might. When I break through, I might need to borrow the power of the River of Enlightenment. Jian Wushuang thought about the river spirit in the River of Enlightenment and could not help but smile. I'm sure that Lord River Spirit's expression will be very interesting when he sees me again. At this moment, Ninth Culpa King, Jian Wushuang, and Divine Marquis Qingfeng did not say a word. They were all eager to return home. Rumble. After 60 years, the three of them finally arrived at the universe passage that led to the Divine Life Palace. Who are you? The two rulers in charge of guarding the gate saw the approaching universe boat and immediately became tense. It's me, the Ninth Culpa King replied indifferently. The three of them walked down from universe boat. Greetings, Ninth Culpa King. The two rulers relaxed when they saw this. They cupped their hands and said, Ninth Culpa King, Ruler Bloodwave, Supreme Giant Axe, and Supreme Gai Fu have received your message and asked us to wait here. They asked me to take you to Supreme Palace as soon as you arrived. Oh? Why are you in such a hurry? Ninth Culpa King, Jian Wushuang, and Divine Marquis Qingfeng could not help but look at each other in confusion. Logically speaking, even if they were asked to report the remains situation, they would not be in such a hurry. Did something happen? The Ninth Culpa King said with a frown. A hint of hesitation flashed through the eyes of the two rulers guarding the door, but they still said softly in the end, "Your Excellency, Ninth Kulpa King, 100 years ago, an honored guest came to the Supreme Shrine and is waiting for you." What distinguished guest? The Ninth Kulpa King's face was filled with a touch of displeasure as he asked again. The two rulers took a deep breath and replied with grave expressions, "It's the people from the Great Void Temple." Great Void Temple? In an instant, Ninth Kulpa King and Divine Marquis Qingfeng's expressions changed slightly, and they looked at Jian Wushuang in unison. Jian Wushuang remained expressionless and asked, "They're coming for me, right?" The two rulers could not help but bitterly smile and nod. "Yes. Then let's go and see what they want." Jian Wushuang sneered in his heart. He had already expected that the people from the Great Void Temple would come to find him. He did not expect that the people from the Great Void Temple had not only come to find him, but had even come to the Divine Life Palace. However, Jian Wushuang did not panic. This was the Divine Life Palace. The people from the Great Void Temple would not dare to do anything out of line. "My lords, shall we send a message now and take you to the Supreme Shrine?" the two rulers asked. The Ninth Kulpa King and the other two nodded upon hearing this. They even revealed a determined smile at Jian Wushuang, as if to say, "Don't worry, we'll take care of everything." A short while later, the three of them arrived at the Supreme Shrine under the guidance of the two rulers. Within the temple, Supreme Master Gai Fu sat at the head of the table, while Ruler Bloodwave and Supreme Giant Axe sat on either side of him. Under the three of them, an old man with white hair and a white beard in a Taishu cloak sat cross-legged and sipped his tea. This person was the 7th Hall Master of the Great Void Temple, the Vice Hall Master, Ruler Whitefloat. Speaking of which, I would like to thank the three of you for your hospitality in the Divine Life Palace. Ruler Whitefloat put down his teacup and smiled. "Whitefloat, you've finished your tea. Shouldn't you be leaving?" Ruler Bloodwave said with an unsightly expression. "There's no hurry. The person I've been waiting for hasn't arrived yet." Ruler Whitefloat glanced at the Ruler Bloodwave and shook his head. Pausing for a moment, the white floating supreme martial artist continued, "Don't worry. Once I've investigated the matter, I'll naturally leave. I won't stay for long. How can the Divine Life Palace be better than our Great Void Temple?" "You!" Ruler Bloodwave was enraged upon hearing this. What kind of place did this Ruler Whitefloat think their Divine Life Palace was? Come and go as you please? Leave as he pleased. Just as he was about to flare up, Supreme Martial Artist Gai Fu, who was sitting at the head of the table, said, "Bloodwave, you are a guest. Don't be rude." Supreme Giant Axe shook his head at him. The Ruler Bloodwave expression wavered upon seeing this. In the end, he snorted coldly and fell silent. Upon seeing this, the corners of Ruler Whitefloat's mouth curled up slightly as he revealed a fearless expression. Even though he was far weaker than Ruler Bloodwave, he was representing the Great Void Temple this time. He believed that the Bloodwave ruler would not dare to do anything to him. Pada pada. At this moment, hurried footsteps could be heard from outside. Soon after, the ruler responsible for guarding the hall hurried in and clasped his hands. "Supreme Master Gai Fu, Supreme Master Bloodwave, and Supreme Master Giant Axe. The 9th Kulpa King has returned and are waiting outside the hall for announcement." The pupils of the Ruler Bloodwave and the Supreme Giant Axe both shrank. As for the Ruler Whitefloat, he immediately stood up and laughed. "Ha ha ha! The person I've been waiting for 100 years has finally arrived. Let them in." Supreme Martial Artist Gai Fu nodded his head with a calm expression. "Yes." The ruler acknowledged and retreated. Not long after, Jian Wushuang and the other two slowly walked in. The 9th Kulpa King stood in the middle, while Jian Wushuang and Divine Marquis Qingfeng walked on both sides. The three of them were expressionless. Supreme Master Gai Fu, Supreme Master Bloodwave, and Supreme Master Giant Axe. The three of them cupped their hands. "Yes, 9th Kulpa King, Divine Marquis Qingfeng, please sit down." Supreme Martial Artist Gai Fu nodded his head. Then, he looked at Jian Wushuang and said, "Jian Wushuang, this is the Vice Hall Master of the 7th Hall of the Great Void Temple, Ruler Whitefloat. I called you over because Ruler Whitefloat has something to ask you. When Ruler Whitefloat asks you about it later, you must not hide anything. Do you understand? Understood. Jian Wushuang nodded and looked at Ruler Whitefloat. He cupped his hands and said, Jian Wushuang greets Ruler Whitefloat. You are Jian Wushuang? Humph. Let me ask you, in the Taro ruins, did you have a conflict with Qing Shuzi of the Great Void Temple? Ruler Whitefloat squinted his eyes. He did not hold back and directly cut to the chase. I guess so. Jian Wushuang nodded his head calmly. The matter between him and Qing Shuzi was not a secret. Back in the Taro ruins, many people had seen Qing Shuzi chasing after him. Therefore, he had no intention of denying it. Humph. It's good that you admit it. Upon hearing these words, a cold glint flashed across the eyes of Ruler Whitefloat as he sneered, Jian Wushuang, let me ask you again, how did you escape from our divine son Qing Shuzi's pursuit? Where is divine son Qing Shuzi now? As he said that, Ruler Whitefloat looked at Jian Wushuang with an oppressive gaze. It was as if he would be furious if Jian Wushuang gave a wrong answer. Back then, when divine son Qing Shuzi chased after me, I was forced to escape to a special place in the Taro ruins. There I got rid of divine son Qing Shuzi. As for where he is now, I don't know, Jian Wushuang said indifferently. What a load of nonsense. Ruler Whitefloat did not wait for Jian Wushuang to finish his sentence. His voice suddenly became stern as he rebuked, Jian Wushuang, I advise you to be more honest. Don't try to be petty in front of me. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang's eyes turned cold. From the moment he stepped into the Supreme Shrine, Ruler Whitefloat had not given him a good look. His words were full of scolding and oppression. Did he really think that he, Jian Wushuang, could be bullied? Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and said calmly, Ruler Whitefloat, you can go and find out for yourself whether I'm telling the truth or not. Still not being honest? Ruler Whitefloat laughed out of anger as he mocked, Jian Wushuang, since you said that you were in a secret place and escaped from our divine son Qing Su's pursuit, tell me, where is the secret place in the Taro ruins? After saying that, Ruler Whitefloat stared at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang was silent for a moment and then said slowly, I've forgotten. You forgot? Ha 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 ha. What a good forgot. Upon hearing these words, the corners of Ruler Whitefloat's mouth curled up into an exaggerated sneer as he burst out laughing. Everyone's expressions turned ugly when they saw this. Even Supreme Gai Fu, who had been resting with his eyes closed, frowned slightly. Whitefloat, you've asked all your questions. Shouldn't you be leaving now? Ruler Bloodwave said, suppressing his anger. Originally, he had allowed Ruler Whitefloat to enter the Divine Life Palace. It could be said that he had given great face to the Great Void Temple. In the end, Ruler Whitefloat did not know what was good for him and did what he did in the Supreme Shrine. Did he have any scruples? Jian Wushuang was the junior he had the most faith in, yet Ruler Whitefloat had threatened and berated him. This was no different from slapping the Bloodwave ruler in the face. No rush. Ruler Whitefloat shook his head and sneered, Jian Wushuang, since you refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit, then don't blame me for bringing you back to the Great Void Temple and slowly interrogating you. After saying that, Ruler Whitefloat turned to look at the Ruler Bloodwave and the other two before saying in a clear voice, the three of you, it seems that this disciple of the Divine Palace does not intend to explain things to me. Since that's the case, let me bring him back to the Great Void Temple and slowly interrogate him. What do you think? Shwa shwa shwa. As soon as these words were spoken, Ninth Culpa King and Divine Marquis Qingfeng instantly stood up and glared at Ruler Whitefloat. You dare! The Ninth Culpa King said coldly, his eyes extremely cold. You must be the Ninth Culpa King, right? What, just because the outside world says that you're comparable to a supreme martial artist, you really think you're a supreme martial artist? Do you think you're qualified to be impudent in front of this old man? Ruler Whitefloat looked at the Ninth Culpa King in disdain and said. He did not notice that Supreme Gai Fu, who was sitting at the head of the table, had already opened his eyes. Ruler Bloodwave and Supreme Giant Axe had extremely cold expressions on their faces. However, even if he did notice it, he probably would not think much of it. The Divine Life Palace was the base camp of special life forms in the vast universe, so its strength was naturally not bad. However, the Great Void Godly Palace was not bad either, and might even be stronger. The Great Void Temple was founded by Divine Emperor Taisu, and there were a total of 7 Hall Masters. Each of these 7 Hall Masters was a supreme expert. Under the 7 Hall Masters, there were 7 Deputy Hall Masters, and all of them were at the supreme cultivation level. He, Ruler Whitefloat, was the Deputy Hall Master of the 7th Hall of the Great Void Temple. He was confident that even though Supreme Gai Fu, Ruler Bloodwave, and the others were stronger than him, they would not dare to offend him. After all, they would have to be wary of the Great Void Temple behind him. But at this moment, how audacious! Who do you think you are? How dare you ask for someone from my Divine Life Palace? Ruler Bloodwave's eyes were filled with anger. Whitefloat, I'm already giving you and the Great Void Temple face by letting you enter the Divine Life Palace to question Jian Wushuang. Now, you're pushing your luck and want to take someone from my Divine Palace? What do you think this place is? Let me tell you, even if your Divine Son Qing Su dies at the hands of my Divine Palace's disciples, he can only blame himself for not being strong enough. He brought this upon himself, understand? Upon hearing these words, Ruler Whitefloat's face could not help but change slightly. However, he did not reply. Instead, he looked at Supreme Gai Fu. He knew that Supreme Gai Fu was the one who could make the final decision here, not the Ruler Bloodwave or the Supreme Giant Axe. He first cupped his hands toward Supreme Gai Fu, then said respectfully, Supreme Gai Fu, you're the head of the 5 lead supremes of the Divine Life Palace, and you're in charge of leading the Divine Life Palace on behalf of the Palace Master. I don't think you're as impulsive as Ruler Bloodwave, right? That Jian Wushuang is merely a 4th stage ruler. To us, he is no different from an ant. I believe you won't become enemies with the Great Void Temple because of him, right? After that, he smiled and added, oh, that's right. Divine Son Qing Su is the beloved disciple of our 1st Hall Master. He's above the supreme martial artist. You have to think carefully about the implications of this. Supreme Gai Fu's expression did not change at all when he heard this. He raised his eyelids and said indifferently, are you threatening this lord? Ruler Whitefloat's pupils contracted upon hearing this. For some reason, his heart suddenly thumped as a bad premonition welled up in his heart. He braced himself and said, Supreme Gai Fu, how would I dare to threaten you? I'm just explaining the implications of this matter to you. After all, he's just a 4th stage great ruler. Why should we affect the relationship between the Divine Palace and the Great Void Temple for him? Supreme Gai Fu, I advise you to reconsider. After hearing the word reconsider, a faint smile appeared on Supreme Gai Fu's aged face. He looked at Ruler Whitefloat with a playful expression and said, do you know that even your 1st Palace Master, Bing Yi, has never dared to ask me to think twice in front of me? You are just an insignificant Deputy Palace Master, and you dare to ask me to think twice. Ruler Whitefloat's expression changed when he heard this. It was only then that he suddenly recalled that Supreme Gai Fu, who was sitting in front of him, was the most senior supreme in the universe. His strength had long since reached an unfathomable level. Supreme Gai Fu, I didn't mean it that way, he hurriedly explained. Before he could finish, Supreme Gai Fu waved his hand. Whitefloat, I asked you to enter the Divine Palace to ask my disciples. This is a courtesy. Since you don't want to be polite, I don't need to be polite either. After saying this, Supreme Gai Fu's voice turned cold. I'll give you 3 seconds to get out of here. Supreme Gai Fu, you... Ruler Whitefloat's expression finally changed upon seeing this, and he wanted to say something. Bloodwave, you should know what to do next, right? How could Supreme Gai Fu possibly listen to him? He looked indifferently at Ruler Bloodwave. Ruler Whitefloat was merely an ordinary supreme martial artist. It was not to the point where he had to make a move. Understood. The Bloodwave ruler grinned, and his face was filled with endless coldness. He had had enough of Ruler Whitefloat. If it was not for the fact that Ruler Whitefloat did not ask him to make a move, he would have sent Ruler Whitefloat flying with a single slap. And now the opportunity had finally arrived. He stood up and walked toward ruler Whitefloat. Blood wave, what are you trying to do? In 100,000 years, it will be the grand ceremony of all races in the universe. The Divine Life Palace and the Great Void Temple will all be there. A look of fear appeared on ruler Whitefloat's face. The ruler Bloodwave was a top-notch supreme martial artist, and his strength was far beyond his own. Before he could finish, "Get lost!" The Bloodwave ruler's eyes widened as he roared. The next moment, he raised his hand and slapped the face of ruler Whitefloat. Bang! In an instant, an extremely majestic and terrifying supreme divine power gushed out from his hand like an avalanche. With a single slap, ruler Whitefloat was sent flying out of the Divine Life Palace. Humph, what Deputy Hall Master? He's just an idiot. How dare he come to my Divine Life Palace to ask for someone? The Blood Wave ruler retracted his hand and shook his head in disdain. Then he looked at Jian Wushuang and his expression softened. In its place was a gentle smile. "Good job, little one," he said, pleased. Jian Wushuang returned the smile. In fact, ever since he had stepped into the Supreme Shrine, he had never worried about his own safety. This was his trust in the ruler Bloodwave and the Divine Life Palace. "All right, you three. Tell me about your trip to the Tarot Ruins." The ruler Bloodwave sat back in his seat and clapped his hands. "Yes." The ninth Culpa King, Jian Wushuang, and Divine Marquis Qingfeng looked at each other and began to slowly explain. A few hours later, Jian Wushuang, ninth Culpa King, and Divine Marquis Qingfeng walked out of the Supreme Shrine. "Jian Wushuang, where do you plan to go next?" The ninth Culpa King stopped and asked. "I think he's trying to break through to the 5th stage." Jian Wushuang replied. Upon hearing this, the ninth Culpa King nodded and said with emotion, "It's time for me to break through to becoming ruler. I was planning to wait until you became an ultimate ruler and then have a good fight with you, but it seems I won't have that chance." The ninth Culpa King had benefited a lot from this trip to the Tarot Ruins. He had a hunch that he would be able to break through to the supremacy stage this time. He had been an ultimate ruler for far, far too long, and had been lacking the opportunity to break through to the ruler level. And now, this opportunity had finally arrived. "We'll talk about it after you break through to the Supreme Being level." Jian Wushuang smiled. "Haha, Jian Wushuang, just you wait. The day we meet again will be the day I become a Supreme." The ninth Culpa King laughed heartily, containing an endless heroic spirit. "The two of you, I'll be taking my leave first." The next moment, the ninth Culpa King soared into the sky and disappeared into the horizon. Divine Marquis Qingfeng, we'll meet again in the future. Jian Wushuang cupped his hands at Qingfeng, took a step forward, turned into a divine light, and quickly flew away. Divine Marquis Qingfeng remained where he was and sighed. It seemed that the ninth Culpa King was going to break through to the Supreme Realm, and Jian Wushuang's future was promising. Only he himself had reached the end of his talent. He would probably be at the ultimate ruler realm in this life. "Forget it. I'm content." Shaking his head, Divine Marquis Qingfeng also left. At the same time, not far from the gate of the Divine Life Palace, an old man with white hair and a white beard crawled up from the ground in a sorry state. "Damn it! The people of the Divine Life Palace should all die." His expression was extremely gloomy. However, there was a handprint on the right side of his face that was formed by divine power. It made his gloomy expression look somewhat comical. "Humph, the Myriad Tribes ceremony will be held in 100,000 years. At that time, the ruler Bloodwave, Overlord Supreme, and Jian Wushuang will suffer the wrath of the Great Void Temple." Ruler Whitefloat turned his head and shot a venomous look at the Divine Life Palace. With a flip of his right hand, a universe boat appeared. He steered the universe boat and shot off into the distance. The Divine Life Palace, the 6th mountain range, next to a small lake. A beautiful woman in plain clothes was cultivating by the lake with her eyes closed. She furrowed her brows, divine power radiating from her body, and the aura she exuded was that of a 4th stage ruler. Suddenly, a pair of hands gently wrapped around her waist from behind and hugged her. Immediately after, a slightly teasing and magnetic voice sounded in her ears. "Schwanger, I haven't seen you for a long time. Your cultivation has improved again. Lung Rushuang slowly opened her eyes. She did not turn around and replied gently, Husband, did your trip to the ruins go smoothly? Naturally, it's smooth. Jian Wushuang smiled and turned Lung Rushuang around. He looked at Lung Rushuang's worried and beautiful face. Even though he had always been calm, he could not help but feel a little touched. Before I left, I promised you that I would return safely. See, I didn't lie to you, right? Jian Wushuang reached out his hand and touched Lung Rushuang's nose with a smile. My husband. Next time you have something to do, bring me along. Lung Rushuang called out to him softly. She reached out and hugged Jian Wushuang gently, burying her head in his arms. Jian Wushuang nodded and reached out his hand to stroke Lung Rushuang's head gently. He felt warm inside. In the blink of an eye, 10 years had passed. In Jian Wushuang's manor in the 6th mountain range, Divine Life Palace. Now it's time to give it a try. Jian Wushuang opened his eyes slowly and a sharp light flashed across his eyes. In the past 10 years, Jian Wushuang had finally reached the peak of his condition. It could be said that he was already half a step into the threshold of a 5th stage great ruler. The only thing he lacked was the fusion of the 8th principle. It was not too difficult for Jian Wushuang to integrate the 8th principle. This was the fastest breakthrough he had ever made since becoming a god. However, this was also the most solid foundation Jian Wushuang had ever had. In the 2nd level of the Tarot ruins, the opportunities he had obtained were too great. After the Tarot sword spirit had possessed him, in order to improve his strength, the divine herbs had been stuffed into Jian Wushuang's stomach as if they were free. Even now, Jian Wushuang's divine body still contained a large amount of medicinal power. Some of the divine herbs could improve Jian Wushuang's divine power, and some could improve his comprehension of the universe principle. However, most of the divine herbs were for Jian Wushuang's integration of the 8th principle. As long as I digest the divine medicine in my body and use the power of the river of enlightenment, I should be able to break through to the 5th stage. Jian Wushuang made up his mind. Then, he said goodbye to Lung Rushuang and walked toward the river of enlightenment. At the riverbank of the river of enlightenment, a short old man with 2 long beards by his mouth was lying on a soft bed. Beside him, a female disciple of the Divine Life Palace was massaging his shoulders and back with a flattering smile. Lord River Spirit, do you like the blood jade coral I gave you? The female disciple of the Divine Life Palace said with a sneer. It's barely passable, I guess. The River Spirit waved his hand and said. At this moment, he was lying down with his eyes slightly closed and his expression was one of enjoyment. There was no trace of the miserable look he had when he was bullied by Jian Wushuang. Then, Lord River Spirit, can I enter the river of enlightenment and study the principles? The female disciple asked excitedly after receiving the River Spirit's approval. Seeing that you're so well-behaved and sensible, you can help me massage for 3 more days. Once you serve me well, you can naturally enter. Lord River Spirit said in a relaxed manner. Yes. The female disciple of the Divine Life Palace started to massage even more diligently. So comfortable. The River Spirit sighed in his heart. This was the right way to open it. What the hell was that guy called Jian Wushuang doing 1,000 years ago? The time when he was suppressed by Jian Wushuang was unbearable. It was the greatest humiliation in his long life. It's all right. I heard that Jian Wushuang has been sent out. I don't think he'll be back for a while. Thinking of this, River Spirit chuckled. If he could, he really did not want to see Jian Wushuang again in his life. At this moment. River Spirit, you really know how to enjoy life. A strange yet familiar voice suddenly sounded in the River Spirit's ears. In that instant, the River Spirit's body froze. He turned his head back in a daze, only to see a figure he never wanted to see again in his life, looking at him with a smile. Jian Wushuang. Plop. Immediately, the River Spirit climbed up from the soft bed with both its hands and feet. After letting out a frightened cry, it jumped into the river of enlightenment. What's going on? The female disciple of the Divine Life Palace was dumbfounded. Lord River Spirit, who was highly respected in the Divine Life Palace, had actually fled in fear. She turned around and saw a black-haired young man in black standing by the river with a smile. Jian Wushuang. The female disciple raised her eyebrows. Jian Wushuang was quite famous in the Divine Life Palace. His battle with the Ninth Culpa King in the trial arena back then could be said to have shaken the Divine Palace. Most of the disciples of the Divine Life Palace knew Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang nodded at her and then stepped into the River of Enlightenment. In the deepest part of the River of Enlightenment, the river spirit bent its waist and hid behind a huge rock. It stuck out its head slightly and looked around with its pair of triangular eyes. Pa! Pa! Suddenly, someone patted his shoulder. Then, the nightmarish voice rang in his ears again with a teasing tone. Lord River Spirit, what are you looking at? The river spirit's body stiffened, and it shivered, turned its head back stiffly. As expected, that figure was standing quietly behind him. Jian Wushuang, are you done? What do you want to do this time? The river spirit's expression changed. He stretched out his short hand and pushed Jian Wushuang's hand away from his shoulder. He could no longer hold back his anger and roared. Jian Wushuang did not mind. He smiled and replied, I'm here to trouble Lord River Spirit to help me break through again. What? A breakthrough? Didn't you just make a breakthrough? Why are you making another breakthrough? River Spirit's eyes widened and he looked at Jian Wushuang in disbelief. Then he took a step forward. No, this guy is going to squeeze me again. I have to leave this place and lie low for a while. The River Spirit's mind whirred, and he instantly made up his mind to avoid the limelight. As he ran, he suddenly realized that he seemed to be retreating. What's going on? The river spirit was puzzled. Then he felt a large hand grab his shoulder. Come on, Lord River Spirit. A burst of laughter came from behind him. The next moment, he heard Jian Wushuang say with a smile, Suppress! Bang! In an instant, a stone tablet with a suppressive force fell from the sky and pressed him down. Ah! Damn you, Jian Wushuang! The river spirit cried out miserably and turned to look at Jian Wushuang. He trembled with anger and said, Jian Wushuang, are you a devil? Lord River Spirit, I promise this will be the last time. Jian Wushuang cupped his hands at him with a smile. Then, he slowly sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes. Clang! A ray of sword light slashed across, instantly cutting the river spirit into two. A dense aura of laws spread out. Jian Wushuang's breakthrough had begun. In the depths of the universe, the stars were shining brightly. The top forces stood there, forming a scene of heroes. The Great Void Star area was located in the center of the universe. As the name suggested, the Great Void Star area was under the jurisdiction of the Great Void Temple. At this moment, in a separate space in the Great Void Star field, there were 7 white divine halls. Each of the 7 white temples was extremely solemn and holy, and they had their own badges. The 7th shrine was a golden wisteria flower. The 7th shrine was extremely tall. There was a long stone staircase that led straight up. The stone staircase was not wide. On the contrary, it was very narrow and cramped. It was filled with an oppressive feeling. Greetings, Deputy Hall Master. The 2 ultimate rulers in charge of guarding the stone stairs, sword and shield in hand, respectfully bowed to an old man with white hair and a beard. Is the palace master in the main hall? Ruler Whitefloat asked gloomily as he clutched his right cheek. The Bloodwave ruler's palm had been condensed from ruler divine power, so it was not easy to get rid of it. Deputy Hall Master. The Hall Master has returned from the ancient starry sky path and is waiting for you in the main hall. The 2 ultimate rulers replied. Yes. Ruler Whitefloat nodded his head. He did not use any divine power and instead walked up the stone stairs step by step. A moment later, Ruler Whitefloat walked to the top of the stone stairs. There was a strange pavilion that was completely red. He pushed open the door of the pavilion. Inside the spacious pavilion, there was no light. A thin old man was sitting cross-legged on the head seat of the pavilion, half of his face hidden in the darkness. Hall Master. Ruler Whitefloat respectfully bowed. Whitefloat, What's wrong with your face? A hoarse voice came from the skinny old man. When ruler Whitefloat heard this, a look of humiliation flashed across his eyes. Gritting his teeth, he replied, Palace Master, this is all thanks to ruler Bloodwave of the Divine Life Palace. Bloodwave? The scrawny old man was surprised and asked, I know Bloodwave. He's an easy person to get along with among the supreme martial artists. Why would he attack you? Are you the one who offended him? Upon hearing these words, a venomous look appeared on ruler Whitefloat's face as he said, Hall Master, you don't know this. The people from the Divine Life Palace are really arrogant. They don't even respect the Great Void Temple. Ruler Whitefloat immediately recounted his experience in the Divine Life Palace, adding a lot of details to the story. The Divine Life Palace that he had talked about was arrogant and domineering, taking advantage of the situation to bully others. However, it was completely different from his actual experience. The scrawny old man listened silently and did not reply. After ruler Whitefloat finished speaking, he shook his head and said, All right, I understand. You may leave. Ruler Whitefloat's face turned anxious as he hurriedly asked, Hall Master, are we just going to let it go like this? Without waiting for him to finish, the skinny old man squinted his eyes and interrupted. I said I got it. Did you not hear me clearly? Ruler Whitefloat fell silent for a moment before cupping his hands and replying, Then Whitefloat will take his leave first. After saying that, ruler Whitefloat turned around and walked out of the hall. However, after he turned around, his expression suddenly became even gloomier and more ruthless. After a while, the pavilion fell into silence. The skinny old man raised his head and suddenly looked at the pitch-black void and sighed. Palace Master Bing Yi, what should we do next? Chi. The air twisted and a silver-haired child around 7 or 8 years old appeared. The child was about 7 or 8 years old. He had red lips and white teeth. However, he had silver hair and silver eyebrows. His eyes revealed a maturity that did not match his age. No one would have thought that this handsome and adorable child was the first hall master of the Great Void Temple, Supreme Bing Yi. Humph, let's not talk about the exaggeration in Whitefloat's words for now. Supreme Gai Fu of the Divine Life Palace is an ancient figure from the same era as the Divine Emperor. Even I have to treat him with the respect of a junior when I see him. He's already very lucky to be able to come back alive. The silver-haired child sneered and shook his head. His gaze then fell on the skinny old man's face and he said, Joe Kuan, I heard that you were the one who chose this deputy hall master? You have bad taste this time. The scrawny old man sighed and replied, Whitefloat is actually a good person except for his love of adding oil and vinegar. After a pause, the skinny old man changed the topic and continued to ask, Palace Master Bing Yi, there's one thing that Whitefloat was right about. Are we just going to let the matter of the Divine Sun go like this? What else do you want to do? Supreme Bing Yi shook his head and said, The Grand Tribe Ceremony is about to begin. I heard that during this grand ceremony, that Lord will distribute 10 seats in the universe and choose 10 people to listen to his lecture. Our top priority now is to fight for a place for our Great Void Temple among these 10 seats. Other matters are not as important as this. What? 10 seats? The scrawny old man was shocked and said, In the last Grand Tribe Ceremony, didn't that Lord only distribute 7 seats? Why are there so many of them this time? Supreme Bing Yi pondered for a moment before saying, When I was on the ancient path of stars, I heard someone say that his lordship is going to choose 3 of the most talented of the universe's ultimate rulers to sit on his seat. That's why there are 3 extra seats for him to listen to the Tao. Palace Master Bing Yi, now that the Divine Sun is dead, does that mean that our Great Void Temple has no chance of winning the 3 seats of the ultimate ruler? The scrawny old man pondered for a while and said with a frown. Upon hearing this, Supreme Bing Yi smiled faintly and said, Don't worry. Our Divine Emperor has already made arrangements for the candidates for the ultimate ruler's seat. The Divine Sun is just a substitute. Oh! The scrawny old man seemed to have thought of something when he heard this. He suddenly raised his eyes, and the divine light in his eyes grew 3 inches. Could it be? Sir Divine Emperor is planning to release Qiu Long? Supreme Bing Yi smiled mysteriously and did not reply. At the same time, it was not just the Great Void Temple. Top powers like the Great Sun Divine Kingdom and the Defeng Divine Kingdom also received news of the deaths of the Heaven's favorites who were sent to the Taro ruins. After some investigation, a name Jian Wushuang came into their sight. Within the first prince's residence in the Defeng Divine Kingdom, an extremely handsome young man wearing a violet golden void python robe was standing in front of a railing with his hands behind his back. In his hand, he held a black light mirror. The image reflected in the mirror was the moment when Jian Wushuang had killed the third prince. His face was full of pain as he muttered to himself, "My dear third brother, I told you not to go to the Taro ruins, but you insisted on going. Look at you now, you've died in someone else's hands. Why don't you listen to my advice? Why? Why did you do that? You should have died in my hands." As the young man spoke, he suddenly laughed in a low voice. His handsome face was filled with joy. After a while, he calmed down and looked down at the scene of Jian Wushuang killing the third prince in the dark light mirror. He laughed evilly and said, "Jian Wushuang? Very good. To thank you for helping me get rid of my third brother, I've decided to kill you." Bang! As soon as he finished speaking, the mystic light mirror shattered into pieces. The young man released his hand and looked into the distance with a cold smile. The Divine Life Palace, the fourth mountain range, the River of Enlightenment. Jian Wushuang, you deserve to be killed. Damn Jian Wushuang. Release me. I'm going to fight you to the death. Arg. Jian Wushuang, try to kill me again if you have the ability. Bang. A sword light flashed, and the River of Enlightenment quieted down. Ah. Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang. I'm telling you, you're in big trouble. You're finished, you're finished. I'm going to report this to Supreme Gai Fu. I'm going to tell them that you're oppressing me. Jian Wushuang, you're about to be driven out of the Divine Life Palace. Ha 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 ha. Burp. Bang. Another sword light came, and the River of Enlightenment fell silent again. The disciples of the Divine Life Palace by the river did not know whether to laugh or cry when they saw this. In the beginning, they were worried that Jian Wushuang would cause trouble. However, when they found out that the river spirit was fine after being killed, and the rules in the River of Comprehension became stronger, they followed Jian Wushuang. At the bottom of the River of Enlightenment, Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged with his eyes closed. The extremely dense aura of laws wrapped around him and was absorbed by Jian Wushuang. In Jian Wushuang's divine body, the eighth rule imprint started to appear gradually, and it extended at an extremely slow speed. The integration of each rule would become more difficult and take longer each time. Jian Wushuang had already planned to cultivate in seclusion for a long time. This time, Jian Wushuang did not devour any Dao fruit that could speed up the integration of order principles. Back then, the sword spirit of the Taro sword had controlled his body. In order to quickly improve his strength, divine herbs had been poured into his stomach like candy. Therefore, the medicinal properties in his body were too strong, and he had to remove the impurities from them first. The fifth stage ruler realm was the second last barrier to breaking through to the supreme level, and so this breakthrough was extremely important. Jian Wushuang would never allow any medicinal impurities to remain in his body. Time flew by and the sea changed. In the blink of an eye, 10,000 years had passed. In the past 10,000 years, many special creatures had entered the Divine Life Palace, creating many legendary stories. Jian Wushuang's story gradually faded away. The river spirit in the River of Enlightenment had long given up on cursing. Like an emotionless corpse, it allowed Jian Wushuang to oppress it. One day, a small whirlpool suddenly appeared on the dark surface of the Dao Comprehension River. With the appearance of this small whirlpool, the water of the Dao Comprehension River suddenly boiled. The dense principles hidden in the water instantly became chaotic. What's going on? Damn it! Who is disturbing my breakthrough? The River of Enlightenment has always been fine. How did it suddenly become like this? Puff, 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 puff. In an instant, countless figures rushed out of the River of Enlightenment and floated in the air. Among them, A burly man looked at the vortex and shouted in a low voice with a livid face, "Bastard! What's wrong, demonic wind ruler?" Immediately, a large group of disciples of the Divine Life Palace swarmed toward the tall man with a burly figure. The tall and burly man was called Demonic Wind Ruler, a peak stage 5 ruler. He had entered the Divine Life Palace 8,000 years ago and was a creation-level creature. His divine power was more than 800 times stronger, and he was the most talented of the new batch of special life forms. Thus, he had quite a bit of prestige among the new disciples of the Divine Life Palace. He was firmly in the leader's position, and he was even known as the #1 expert below the ultimate ruler realm. Humph, someone is in the river of enlightenment and has disturbed the energy of the principles, Demonic Wind Ruler said with an unsightly expression. He had only been one step away from fusing with the 9th law and breaking through to the ultimate ruler realm, but the appearance of the whirlpool had sucked away all the law energy in the river of enlightenment, causing him to fail in his attempt to break through. At this moment he was extremely furious. Who dares to interrupt Demonic Wind Ruler's cultivation? Who doesn't know that senior apprentice brother Demonic Wind is about to break through to the ultimate ruler realm? Why are you here to cause trouble? The new disciples of the Divine Life Palace said with righteous indignation. Have all the people in the river of enlightenment come out? Demonic Wind Ruler asked with a sinister expression. A new disciple glanced at the figure standing in the void and quickly replied, Demonic Wind, everyone in the river of enlightenment has come out. Is that so? The Demonic Wind Ruler looked down and saw that the whirlpool in the river of enlightenment was like a black hole, sucking away all the law energy within and expanding at a visible rate. Then what is this? Demonic Wind Ruler pointed at the vortex with his chin. The surrounding disciples of the Divine Life Palace looked at each other and could not help but frown. In the past 10,000 years, they remembered that they were the only ones who had entered the river of enlightenment. Demonic Wind Ruler, I know. There's indeed one more person who hasn't come out of the river of enlightenment. A round-faced disciple suddenly shouted. Who is it? Ruler Windfiend and the others all turned to look at the round-faced disciple. At the same time, the Demonic Wind Ruler made up his mind. He was definitely going to teach the person who had disturbed the energy of the principles in the river of enlightenment a lesson and caused him to fail in his attempt to break through to the final ruler realm a lesson. He was confident that he was invincible against any other ultimate ruler, and that the ultimate ruler of the Divine Life Palace would never come to the Tao Comprehension River. The round-faced disciple could not help but feel a little timid under the gazes of so many people. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and replied in a low voice, Demonic Wind Ruler. I remember that there is a senior brother named Jian Wushuang in the River of Enlightenment. Jian Wushuang. When everyone heard this, they looked at each other. As for Demonic Wind Ruler, he frowned. He had heard of Jian Wushuang's name before. When he had first come to the Divine Life Palace, he had heard many elders in the Divine Palace talk about how talented Jian Wushuang was and how powerful his battle strength was. He was only a 4th stage ruler, but he was able to fight an ultimate ruler. However, Demonic Wind Ruler scoffed at this. He did not believe that Jian Wushuang, who was only a 4th stage ruler, could fight against the ultimate ruler. In his opinion, Jian Wushuang had been demonized and that was just a rumor. He had also asked the elders in the Divine Palace which ultimate ruler Jian Wushuang had fought. The elders in the Divine Life Palace were speechless and could only stammer about the battle between Jian Wushuang and the 9th Culpa King in the trial arena. Demonic Wind Ruler felt even more disdainful. Trial arena? That was suppressing the cultivation of 2 people to the same level. Could it be considered a battle with the ultimate ruler? Humph, when Jian Wushuang comes out, I'd like to see how strong the rumored #1 genius of the Divine Palace is. Demonic Wind Ruler let out a cold snort.